Revolted onto the right. We've seen this composition coming out day in and day out of our Western teams in particular. Also important to note, we got our double of roots coming up here, Zyronic, making sure we're taking advantage of those spotters, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the entire focus of this map. And one of the things I want to focus on for this is, does the addition of Trill give them a little bit of an extra advantage? He's a guy that definitely comes up with more out-of-the-box strategies for most teams. I mean, I saw what he came up with for the MDI last year. It was some
That's right.
crazy strategies. So interested to see if they can come up with something here, because we've seen pretty much similar spotter strategies from all the teams so far.
We have, and it's not only making sure that they have people in place to be able to generate these good strategies, but we have so much more time to be able to put them together. Think about it. We had 2 or 3 days for teams to be able to practice for cup play, right? This, we got 2 weeks to prepare. We have a full 8-9 dungeon map to be able to work with on that. It makes them a lot more comfortable, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. And I mean, right off the bat, we're already seeing something completely different from what we saw in the Cup series. They're actually pulling the first Tides pack outside of the boss room into both packs inside the boss room. So this is about double the size of the pull that we normally see in the Cup play from a couple months ago. So I'm not surprised to see this. These teams have had 2 weeks to, you know, make their strats even better than they were in the Cups.
Yeah, I really love seeing Method EU running behind the stables here as they're in the first boss's room. Line of sighting everything. They have to watch out for that Tides Emissary with Beguiling, as it's going to allow all those mobs to free cast. Any surrounding mobs will not be susceptible to crowd control, so it was a lot of damage for Xaylia to heal up.
And a little bit of a difference here, of course, Method EU was able to finish the Trash Pack first, but they did commit their Bloodlust to that, so they do have that on cooldown. They're not going to be able to use it for the second boss like we saw from a lot of teams like Method and A, where they try to phase that boss a little bit quicker. One less phase gives them about 40-45 seconds, so they do have Bloodlust on cooldown. I'm assuming that Games Revolted is either going to save it for the first boss or maybe the second boss later on. Interested to see what they plan to do with that.
It's a little bit of a weird pull onto this one. It seems like Method EU just made 2 pulls into 1, whereas Games Revolted still kind of taking their time onto that, and then maybe it's just a consistency thing. What are the dungeons that they're looking at? And now they're ended up pulling the boss to the side of Games Revolted, so they're going to get started. But at this point, they're already a little bit behind, as Method EU has Bainbridge down to 65%.
Yeah, and I mean, this is kind of the name of the game of this boss is kite the boss into the bombs, make him stop targeting you for a little while, and then he takes a little bit of extra damage. But as long as your healer, who is the only ranged class in the group at this point, keeps kiting the boss into bombs, it's going to be an easy boss to take care of for these teams.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing those saps just about to wear off on the side of Games Revolted. You have those marksmen that are the marksman and, of course, the Vanguard on this pull. You've got to make sure they're dropping the crowd controls on them, shut them down. And we haven't mentioned it yet, but Siege of Boralus also has a couple routes that you can go with, depending on if you're Horde or Alliance.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge difference in the dungeon. For one of the factions, you get access to a lot of extra trash in the form of all of those cutters around the second section of the dungeon. I believe both of our teams are also playing Horde, so this is what we normally see from a lot of teams here for that extra trash percentage. It just helps you out throughout the entire dungeon.
That's right, and you don't have to deal with a couple more deadly mobs as well. They have some of the bomber mobs, the Alliance side, and there's also a little bit more RP. There's a little bit more build-up as you're trying to be able to get through some of the barriers that get busted down after the third boss.
Yeah, but I mean, really, all of this stuff at the start of the dungeon, I would assume these teams have practiced these dungeons enough to where they have most of the strategy down. It's going to come down to that spotter RNG, whether or not you can get the spotter targets on the right players. That spotted artillery is going to make the winner of this dungeon. So just want to see the strategy here, see if there's anything new. I remember at the end of the Cups in the second half of the season, what we saw from a lot of teams was this massive double spotter pull where they ran through the entire second half of the dungeon, tried to get rid of 30 or 40% at the same time, and we saw a really low success rate on that.
It was a very mixed bag.
It didn't work out for a lot of them. So with this 2 weeks of practice, we're going to see if they're going to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, and we've seen it a couple times as well with a lot of the stress of back-to-back-to-back matches in so many cases where people are forgetting crucial talents. They're messing up a little bit in their routing. They're not getting quite enough percentage, having to go back for more. So when we're on the BlizzCon stage, it's the first round, and these guys are facing elimination. They got to be able to perfect it.
And let's get into the affixes. We haven't talked about the affixes here a lot. The most important affix, of course, is the seasonal affix they have to deal with Beguiling, and of course, this is the Tides heavy dungeon. So whenever there's an emissary of Tides in that pack, you can't crowd control any of the mobs. Interrupts, stuns, any form of CC, you can't do anything. So you're going to see them try to focus that emissary of the Tides down, so they have to deal with any of the mechanics on top of that. We also have Explosive, which, for the size of pulls these guys are doing, especially with the spotters, it's going to be really dangerous for them.
That's right, and of course, since they don't have any of the ranged DPS, they're going to have a couple of those rogues be on the explosive duty, making sure they're taking as many of them down, because, boom, right as you start a pull of 4 or 5 mobs, you have 3 explosives spawn. They must be a single target focus. No AoE cleave will be able to kill them. It's important that they just have that focus and have the people around them make sure they're doing their jobs, because one explosive is just going to deal about half your HP.
And of course, on the side of Method EU, we have the first of those spotters in the dungeon. You see that targeted mark on top of Zaylia right now. Drops those circles on the ground. Any enemies in the dungeon that are inside that circle, as well as the players in the group themselves, will take a massive amount of damage. And you can see just one set of that debuff killed everything they pulled pretty much.
Yeah, it's such a pain whenever you're the healer, because there's also pressure to making sure you're standing in melee. And as you mentioned, those gutters are a great source of extra trash percentage. They also can deal some very nasty dots if you're standing too close.
Oh, I mean, I've personally stood by them, got hit in the back, and I instantly had to hit the release button and run back. It's not great, but they did it fantastically there, and I'm assuming they're going to keep going. This is something new, though. We usually see teams completely skip this pack here because they go with that large spotter strategy at the end of the dungeon. So this is something we don't normally see. This is another Tides pack. It's a dangerous one to deal with. There's a commander in there as well that has a lot of health. This just is something we don't normally see teams deal with.
You're right, and be able to start looking at how they grow. And while, of course, you're tuning in, you guys are checking out both teams at once, be sure to check out the squad stream feature with Twitch. Should just be a big little sidebar up at the top. Be able to just jump in between each team, focus them, and see exactly what they're doing at will.
And yeah, that's a fantastic way to see just the full screen of your favorite team. Of course, right now, Method EU is about one trash pack ahead in terms of percentage. They're 11% ahead, but like we mentioned, Games Revolted decided to completely skip that pack we were talking about at the start of the bridge. So in terms of where they are in the dungeon, they're about at the exact same point. But they're going with different similar strategy here. It took a little while for Games Revolted to pull the trash into the boss. But this is the second spotter of the dungeon. They're pulling the trash into the boss. They're going to let the spotter deal with the trash while they deal with boss damage.
Yep, it's important to watch out, and important to note, even though there is about that 10-12% difference in terms of trash, it really starts coming down to that spotter. They're going to be able to have a more aggressive pull on the side of Games Revolted. They should be, at least to be able to start catching up onto that end. We've seen a lot of big runs from these teams going all the way into Hadal Alley with that spotter. So you're going to start seeing it just off to the side, but it's interesting on the side of Method EU. They haven't pulled any of those Marauders in the periphery.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something typically that you would kill with a spotter, but I believe they don't actually have any trash cans, so it makes sense for them to completely skip them and leave them there for the entire time. It's just a little less headache for them to deal with. Now, of course, the thing to mention with this boss, Red Captain Lockwood, it's a very phased boss. Every single time that yellow energy bar below the boss health gets to 100%, she becomes untargetable, jumps on the ship, and you go into another transition phase. And of course, the transition phases are the deadliest part of the fight.
Here's what they're doing. They want to make sure they're taking advantage of keep your wits about you, so they're having that extra target coming in every time for our double outlaw rogues. Buffs up their single target, now then taunts another Marauder, brings it in. We got the spotters at very low HP around there. They want to make sure they keep it that way. And then they got one more Marauder waiting in the wings. They want to keep on buffing up that damage. I love seeing this Ring of Peace. Whenever she's bouncing around like that, she cannot disengage back to the ship. They're just taking a little bit of extra time. That's what you love to see out of these guys.
They got 4% boss health from that.
That's right.
She goes up at 48%. That's pretty good. 44-0 is actually completely possible on this boss, even though it's tyrannical. It could be really low.
He does drop really low, and Trill does go down, so they use their first and only battle res available at the moment. They got about a minute or two before they'll be able to get another one. And when you're on a boss that's so single target focused, we're in tyrannical as well, so 40% more HP onto these. Just this annoying wall that they have to be able to get through.
I'm just looking at the damage that Genji's putting out right now. You know he's rolled a couple 5 buffs on this boss. He's doing so much damage on the rogue, and of course, Outlaw does have a little bit of RNG with their roll the bones mechanic, but usually it kind of averages out over the course of the dungeon. But man, he's really pumping out some single target damage right now.
That's right, and you're checking it out right now. And these guys pull the bosses around the same time, so it seems like they're not too terribly far off. But I wonder if they're going to be able to make it before she disengages. We got about 10% left. She's about 70% energy or so. Looks like they'll be able to take it down, but I think Games Revolted, they just got her back. Okay, so they should both be good. They shouldn't get one more phase.
I mean, that's a pretty big advantage for Method EU. They just phase the boss one phase faster than Games Revolted did. That's like we said, it's about a 40 or 45 second difference in addition to the extra HP you have to deal with on the boss. So they're just going through this dungeon a lot faster than other teams. You know, I was talking with the Method EU players before, and they're kind of psyching themselves up. I feel like the only time Method EU really loses is when they make the mistakes.
And we've seen that a number of times where there's some inconsistencies here or there that'll be kind of a pain for them. But in general, they're able to play their own game, execute to perfection, and we even saw them putting up some very big wins when they were playing non-meta classes because their routes were so strong, because their execution was so strong. And let's see how they do onto this one as we enter Hadal Alley.
And this is one of the big 2 pulls in the dungeon. They've run through, like we mentioned, that entire area after the second boss, pulling a large amount of trash here. They need to make sure they stack everything up, use the Ring of Peace and CC properly here, make sure they're dealing with all of those explosives. They only have melee characters, so that Demolisher is going to provide a lot of area of denial, so they have to make sure that they get the circle on top of all the trash, and they also deal with all the explosives.
That's right, and they'll definitely be taking advantage of the acrobatic strikes from those outlaw rogues, getting a little bit more melee reach. Probably see on the side of Gingy, he just puts one of the Deadeye shots into any of the explosives, making sure they kill it very quickly. We've seen a couple times where they're not getting quite that level of crit since the explosive orb does scale with the rest of the dungeon level. But if they don't have the crit onto their pistol shot, then they're going to require one more hit, or they have to jump into it, maybe burn cloak.
Oh, I love this strategy. Mira's pulling the Emissary of the Tides away from the trash pack so they don't have to deal with any of the CC not being able to be dealt, and then he paralyzes it out there, and they root it just for good measure. This is a fantastic strategy. Just Mira is showing something that monks can do. They can taunt the mob away. Fantastic. And of course, once again, more spotter things, just making sure they place those circles on top of the group. The important thing to note here, neither the Commander nor the Demolisher can be damaged by that spotter, so everyone's going to be single target focusing those two mobs down while they deal with everything else.
That's right, and they're at 82% at the moment, so they're just taking all of those mobs down. It looks like they are going to be finishing off the spotter as well, so they still got quite a bit of trash to be able to make up, but they've almost completely cleared this room.
I mean, this has been fantastic so far. I think they have the other half of this other half of the room, and I'm not quite sure that'll give them exactly what they need for count. But listen, you know, they've been practicing for 2 weeks. It should give them perfect count. If it's not, I'd be very surprised.
But they're just going all going, but his boss. They ended up crowd controlling some of the poison mobs to be able to give them a little bit more breathing room to work with onto this one. But they do still have to deal with that Tides Emissary. All of those shots from the snipers are going off onto the group. They're going all over the place. You've been seeing a couple melee hits going on to Fraggy and Gingy right now with those poison debuffs.
I mean, the reason this is scary is because of that Tides Emissary. In the strategy that we normally saw in the Cup season, we would see two rogues go and CC the two Emissary of the Tides while they pulled the entire room with the spotters. This is a completely separate strategy. They focused that Emissary of the Tides down instantly before they had to deal with any extra damage from the mobs, and now they're just free to once again deal with all the trash mobs, use the spotter if they choose to. This should be I mean, they made the pull look so easy.
I'm more worried about this Commander right now. With how Hadal works, any of the tidal waves going around the room, the breakwater creating void zones, I'm really worried if there's going to be any unnecessary tramples going out. We are seeing Fraggy pop tricks, redirects his threat onto the tank. They do drop the stun and do get back onto the boss very quickly. And I like this again. Same thing that they did on the second boss. They're leaving a couple mobs out, so the rogues are still going to be able to pump greater single target healing, or target damage, excuse me.
And the important thing to mention here is this is a tyrannical boss, so you really want to make sure you're focusing as much on boss damage as possible. So just pulling these snipers one at a time, like I'm assuming they're going to do, like they did on Dread Captain Lockwood, this will help them out with their single target damage immensely. Usually Outlaw isn't that great of a single target class, but if you let them use their keeps wits about you, get more of those double strikes, they can actually do very significant single target damage.
That's right, you love to see it, and they get themselves in a perfect position there. So they started off with the saps, they ran back, they dropped the blinds onto them, and by the time those 2 minutes were up from both crowd controls, they were good to go to be able to take on Hadal on that end. And you are seeing that they're putting a lot more focus, they're putting a lot more damage into these guys, because those extra shots, those extra pulse of damage, you really just hate to see. And even looking at this, Zalia, he got his staff proc as well, so he's been pumping out quite a bit of damage here.
I mean, this is the thing. They've dealt with all the trash they need. They're at 100%. Like we predicted, of course. They shouldn't mess that up, obviously. But they've got their 100% trash. All they have to do is deal with the last 40% of Atal'Dazar Fathom and then deal with the final boss, and they're going to be done with the dungeon. But they're very far ahead of Games Revolted right now. Games Revolted is just now starting to deal with the trash in Hadal's room. They've got 21% left to get on the board. They've only had one death. There's not been any major problems for them. They're just not going as fast as Method EU is.
Yeah, and it's been Method EU's ability to break things down into as dense of pulls as possible. I mean, we saw just 3 pulls after they killed the second boss. They ran up, shrouded past. I do believe that they just ran right past the Void Emissary as well. So they actually had a great moment where Zalia was mounted up on with Now. They ran past the Void Emissary once it was already aggroed, making sure they didn't get hit. Then they don't have to deal with that later on. So these extra little skips, even though they are running Horde side, are very cool to be able to see.
Yeah, and Atal'Dazar Fathom getting sub 15% for Method EU, no major issues coming out. It's just a little bit of burst damage every now and then. They're able to just get behind that pillar and not be in any of those frost patches to take 0 damage from the wave, and this should be the end of Atal'Dazar Fathom for Method EU. On the other side, Games Revolted has now finally engaged Atal'Dazar Fathom. This dungeon is far from over. A wipe on a boss for Method EU could put Games Revolted right back in this dungeon.
That's right, and Vic Goth, the last boss of this dungeon, is an absolute pain, and it's quite a long boss as well. It's one of the longer bosses we've seen on an 18, on Tyrannical. It is quite deadly as well. We really haven't even seen the final affix we haven't really talked about so much. It's been skittish. It's been very forgiving for them having the double rogue, the double tricks at their disposal.
I mean, yeah, the tricks of the trade definitely makes Skittish not that big of an issue, not to mention the spotter dealing most of your damage throughout the dungeon for you. Skittish is, I want to almost say a non-affix here. Now, of course, You forget to hit Tricks of the Trade, one of these pulls, your rogue could go down. That could be a problem for your team. But man, Method EU, 0 deaths going into the final boss of the dungeon. This has been an absolute perfect dungeon from them so far.
That it has, and you're seeing Azalea didn't even really worry about getting a drink onto that one. He's got his Innervate available to them. He made sure that he used his Bark Skin very quickly so he could self-dispel and make sure he reduces some of the damage he was taking from the dot on Vikgoth, and doing a really good job.
And this is a very scary boss, especially on Tyrannical with how much health these tentacles have. The name of the game here, once again, you have to make sure you're getting down that Gripping Terror. Once the Gripping Terror is killed, the Engineer comes out, he enables the cannon for you, and you deal with a third of the boss's HP. You do that 2 more times, you get through the entire boss.
Doing quite a good job throughout this, and it really starts speaking to their own preparation. I mean, we've seen a number of times where, like you mentioned before, double spotter pulls were just not being very successful, not being very consistent. They didn't even bother. They just kept one around with them the entire time, and maybe it also might have to do with how they're just adjusting some of those routes and the extra time to practice some of these to make sure they get whatever is most consistent for them.
Well, I'm interested to see. They don't have their Bloodlust available, and this second platform is usually where we see teams save their second Bloodlust for, because on top of the Gripping Terrors, these Demolishing Terrors also constantly spawn throughout the platform. And if you aren't able to beat one of the third Demolishing Terror, you have a big problem tanking all 3 of them. So, interested to see, did they save cooldowns for it? We saw the Storm Earth and Fire coming out from Mira's there, so it looks like they've got some stuff available, but hitting the DPS check of beating the third Demolishing Terror is still very difficult to do.
It's very difficult, but when you're looking at 20% left on Hadal on the side of Games Revolted, Method EU should have this well in hand, and that's always one of the things we've talked about through our interviews with them is, we're able to see how the other team's doing when we're looking at our online games. Here, you're not able to kind of get a peek as to where everybody else is doing. But when we've interviewed them, they've always said, we're not really worried about our opponents. We know our speed, we know our internal clock as to when we kill each boss. So when they feel comfortable with that, they don't really have to worry too much about making sure they adjust their route and tweak the route even further to make sure they have Bloodlust on one boss.
Yep, and the second Gripping Terror goes down for Method EU. They'll be able to take the second third of the boss's HP away. They do have to deal with these 2 Demolishing Terrors, like we mentioned. The third Demolishing Terror spawns, so now they have to off-tank them. Actually, because of the spawn position now is just able to tank both of them.
I was about to say, they have an incredible spawn position, not only for now to be able to tank both of them, but for the rogues to be able to continue cleaving as well. It's just really nice, and doesn't seem to be too big of an issue as well. Keep in mind, Windwalker Monks are pretty tanky as well. They've got a lot of defensives at their disposal, so if it needed to happen, you're able to get a number of different stuns from the rogues, from the Monk, have him tank for just a little bit onto that one, drop Bark Skin on him if you needed to. It wasn't that much of an issue, and the positioning just made it better.
And of course, on the final platform, that last Demolishing Terror that spawns at the start has about triple the HP, so we see most teams just completely skip that first Demolishing Terror and burn down the final Gripping Terror, and they've saved everything for this. All the cooldowns on the board, the Gripping Terror is now down to 40%, and it looks like it's going to be a perfect dungeon for Method EU. No mistakes on the board at all. This has been a crazy run, and if Method EU continues to play like this throughout the tournament, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with.
This is not what I expect out of a lower bracket game, unless it's BlizzCon onto these guys. They do not want to be here. This definitely was not the positioning that they were hoping for, and they're looking to be able to get out of that spot as quickly as they can.
And of course, there it goes. The final Gripping Terror is down. They'll get access to that final cannon in a couple seconds here. These slams are pushing people back, but as long as they're able to hop in the cannon, they'll be totally fine. The cannon's available. Genji's inside. The final shot goes off, and Method EU takes game 1.
And in style as well. Nobody going to go down at all.
And let's play. It needs to come in at this point. Love seeing it. The double DKs on both sides. I'm really a big fan of the Mistweaver on this one as well. I'm surprised Haley's not going with it.
I mean, it's interesting to see a difference in the terms of healers. Usually when we see somebody not swap to the new sort of comp healer, which is that, like you mentioned, the Mistweaver Monk here, it's usually a matter of either having something special planned with the Druid, or maybe it's just a comfort pick. So I'm interested to see if playing the Druid enables anything here for them.
Be interested as well as we're seeing both Unholy DKs, popping off and absolutely obliterating these packs. One thing we're going to see a lot of in Shrine are those snap spots as well.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a reason for that, of course. Shrine is notorious for being one of the most difficult dungeons for dealing with the trash, especially this first section of the dungeon before the first boss. There's so many casts that you have to deal with. That's why we see them running the double Unholy DK, because as you pull more, you do more and more exponential damage to the point where you kind of just kill the trash before it does anything.
That's right, we've seen a number of times, and we're going to consistently see it tonight of how well these guys are going to be able to start grabbing all the trash that they can, bringing it into the boss as Method EU is just about to engage with Atal'Dazar.
And you're going to see the Unholy DKs with Bloodlust, with the Army of the Dead. They're going to be popping off on single target. Of course, they're pulling all of these extra mob ins just to fuel that Unholy DK AoE engine. They'll be building up their Festermite stacks, giving them a massive amount of strength, and you're going to see the power of the Unholy DK. Look at Fragnance going up, already on 400 KDPS.
Yeah, you love to see it, and hopefully they're going to be able to bring in that other round of blobs. But Mears does go down. It looks like he's even out of range of Fragnance. I'm not sure if he's actually off the cliff or not.
That's completely uncanny for. I mean, that's.
I'm not seeing a battle res going up.
There's no battle res coming out, so I mean, there's a question that you have to ask here. It's a tyrannical boss. Aquaster's at 80%. Do you want to 4-man the rest of the boss, or do you want to reset and start again? And it looks like they're going to reset the boss, so they're going to have to deal with the rest of the trash. But Fragnance also goes down. This is another problem. It's a raging dungeon with everything so low and not having all of your DPS available. You can't deal with this trash with the Unholy DKs.
They just have a full round of Shadow Melds go out just to be able to try to drop threat from those bosses.
And it looks like it.
Yeah, it looks like it at that point. But you are seeing now just about to go down. Everybody is dying. Method EU having their wipe, and this is the opening that Games Revolted needs to really get back in the series.
And they went for a similar pull. It looks like they're still dealing with a lot of the trash from that pull, but it looks like they were able to deal with the Unholy DKs. You can look at the damage they're doing, and you might look at Trill's damage and say, wow, he's doing nothing compared to the Unholy DKs. But this is usually a team play. Usually, as an Outlaw Rogue, you're not going to want to hit that Blade Flurry to do that AoE damage. You'll opt not to, just so you can let the Unholy DKs take advantage of it. He won't worry about cleaving until there's only 1 or 2 mobs left. So just a huge team play there from Trill. These guys are looking fantastic.
Very big team play, and you are seeing Trill in a great position to still be able to cleave onto Windspeaker, hopefully onto both Aqualings as well. He does have quite a large melee range compared to those DKs, and you're seeing they're cleaving down 2 at a time instead of having any one singular focus, so they got to really watch out for any of the surging rushes coming out from these Aqualings.
Yeah, and of course you can see most of them go off and stand on top of the stairs because the surging rushes will never actually go past the circle of the room, so just big heads-up play. I mean, Trill just stayed in the center of the room. I don't really know. Maybe he's just more confident than the rest of the players, but that was, you know, that's the hardest part of the fight, when all 3 of the Aqualings are surging, rushing at the same time. And usually what we'll see from a lot of teams is them focusing down the Aqualings one at a time, but Games Revolted opted to cleave down 2. That shows that they are very practiced in this dungeon, and like we said yesterday, a 0-death run, Method EU has to catch up fast.
They do, and that's going to be increasingly difficult because on the other side, Games Revolted also has that Windspeaker held as you're seeing that extra haste buff that everyone's standing in to take advantage of it, and they're barely dealing any damage whatsoever to it. They're taking advantage of that bonus haste field, and we're also on the Raging Affix, so we want to make sure that that mob is only enraging when we have... Actually, they don't even have a Soothe Dispel at that point. I was about to say, they don't even have the Soothe Dispel at the moment, so when Windspeaker held drops low, he is going to be dealing double damage, and that is going to have to be something they focus down immediately.
And that's the benefit of having the Resto Druid. They're the only healer that has that Soothe available that will remove the Raging effect. Of course, we haven't talked about what Raging is. It's a double damage modifier whenever they get below a certain point of health, and they keep that until they die, so it's really dangerous to deal with. Of course, with the double Unholy DK comp, usually you're in that Raging scenario for such a small amount of time that you really don't need to deal with it. You just kill the mob so fast.
That you do, and we're also seeing interesting from looking at the talent perspective. We're able to look at everyone's cooldowns, defensives, and offensive cooldowns right underneath their character frames, and we're seeing Dampen Harm coming out on the side of Igloo instead of Diffuse Magic. I love to be able to see this here because not only is Diffuse Magic massive for magic damage, which is great for a lot of this dungeon, but it also auto-dispels you, which is something that he just cannot have for the last boss with that big damage buff.
Something to mention here, Igloo did proc his staff here. He won't that have available. He won't be able he won't be able to build up those stacks for the final boss of the dungeon where he'll be able to pretty much one-shot all of those eels they pull. He will be able to build up maybe like 4 or 5 minutes of stacks, but that's not 100% ideal for them not having that available. They'll just have to let the Unholy DKs deal with it, unfortunately.
That's true, and it's tough to be able to make sure that you have the staff stacks available as a Mistweaver Monk. Running with the new style with Way of the Crane, the new Conflict and Strife Essence makes it so you can do some incredible damage. You're going to see a big chunk of mana go and disappear from Igloo as he pops Way of the Crane, starts his spinning to win. He's running double crit damage modifiers from his Azurite traits with Lightborn Infusion and Swirling Sands, so he is putting up some great numbers, especially in terms of just stabilizing the group. We've seen, you know, this is some decent HPS, but everybody was able to get into the defensive field. We've seen previously where some very aggressive pulls are able to be enabled not only from double Unholy DK, but also from a Mistweaver Monk with Way of the Crane.
And that was fantastic use, like you mentioned, of the ring and piece to make sure everything got knocked back so that they could just stand inside that safety zone on the ground there, taking 75% reduced damage, just making sure that they're safe. Now, of course, once Runecarver Soren does get below 30% HP, he gets raging, and that carved flesh absolutely chunks you, even with the damage reduction. So you really need to make sure that you aren't in that phase for a long time, and they pulled that pull off perfectly. We've seen so many teams go down to that throughout the past year.
And a lot of times it's also about making sure that you're watching as this goes together, as they're pulling these mobs together, and not eating up too much time without focusing some of the right mobs. We're seeing Soren, he has a lot of HP at his disposal, and they did a very good job at making sure they took it all down. We've also seen this skip in particular across the bridge, going to the second boss room, been failed a number of times. They did a great job getting out of the way of any of those Tempests, any of the other tornadoes going around. And again, another huge pull on the side of Games Revolted, hoping to extend their lead.
And once again, you can see the AoE stuns coming out whenever they have those area of denials on the ground. We'll probably see the Ring of Peace after this leg sweep. Their AoE CC, this almost reminds me of Legion with how much AoE CC they're using and perfectly using leg sweeps. I mean, the frontal stuns from the Warrior, their Ring of Peace, they're perfect. They don't even have to worry about standing in those stuns. The trash is gone. That was perfect.
You love to see it. I mean, even just, the 60k DPS, 60k HPS out of the Mistweaver onto that one. It feels amazing. I love this Shroud coming up right now. They're skipping a couple of the initiates right now. They want to make sure they're getting some good cleave damage right when they get the haste buff. It should drop in just a moment right now, and then they're going to be able to absolutely pump that single target damage into Galecaller Fae.
Yeah, and I mean, that's really... Unfortunately, they're not going to be able to do too much because the trash kind of there just instantly dies.
Yeah.
But what I'm interested to see here is if they're going to opt to use a strategy we saw come out in the eastern region of the Final Cups last season, where they end up standing on the ledge on the right side of the room. It looks like they're opting to not do that. They're just going to be standing in the middle of the room, dodging tornadoes and cleaving the bosses down. Now, of course, the major strategy that we see for most teams is to make sure you're focusing down Galecaller Fae. Oh, and here we go. They're in this position now. And the significance of this position is you'll be able to dodge all of the tornadoes. You don't have to move too much for them. The only thing you have to make sure you watch out for is that frontal stun from Brother Ironhall.
That's right, and getting this positioning perfect has been taking a lot of time for some tanks, and being able to see it on full display, making sure you're able to let all the melee sit up on that ledge, avoid any of the tornadoes while the tank is avoiding them themselves, and making sure they very quickly get Galecaller Fae out of that field, making sure none of the Unholy Decay or any of the other dots dropping off. So it's very important to have quick movement on the tank. Lots of pressure on them.
And like I was mentioning before they started to move into position, usually what we see from a lot of the safer strategy teams is they'll focus down Galecaller Fae because they don't want to have to deal with the slicing blast interrupts for too long, but they're opting to go for the more efficient, faster boss kill strategy where they cleave them down for the most part equally. You can see they're at roughly at 50% right now, so this is going to be better in the long run. It's probably about 30 seconds faster than focusing one boss down, so you'd like to see the efficiency here.
Yeah, and you need to have every little benefit. I mean, at the moment, Method EU is behind, but at this point, they've already pulled Galecaller Fae and Brother Ironhall onto this one. They're just really getting started while Games Revolted is halfway through, but trash percentage is very close by. You got to keep in mind those 8 deaths, but we can't count Method EU out just yet.
I mean, those 8 deaths are a massive amount of time. 40 seconds is nothing to laugh at. It's probably, that's a pretty significant amount of time. Games Revolted would have to pretty much have a huge problem, or Method EU, like they mentioned, would have to have some ridiculous strategy which makes up all of that lost time. And I mean, at this point, with the way that Games Revolted played yesterday, I'd be very surprised to see them go down in the dungeon.
It's true, and but one of the most interesting things, though, is Method EU was talking about how strong their times in this dungeon can be. We've seen constant back and forth from teams as to whether or not they're going to be able to quickly kill the final boss onto this one, how quickly they'll be able to do it, how well they'll be able to take advantage of the Eel's extra cleave damage so far. I'm interested in seeing how many phases we're going to have to get on 18 Tyrannical.
Yeah, now, of course, the one advantage that they still have is Zaylee still has a staff available, so he's going to be able to completely one-shot all of those if he's able to proc it perfectly, and usually, for a healer, it's not really that difficult to do, so, I mean, that is an advantage, but how much of an advantage is that really? The Unholy DKs can just take care of it.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say is, yeah, it's nice to be able to go and have a massive one-shot proc. I love being able to do it on live servers, but it also just fuels massive single-target damage, so you have to be able to see which is going to be more beneficial to your group.
Yep, and of course we do have the second boss going down for Games Revolted here, while Method EU, we mentioned it earlier, they're opting to go for the safer strategy here. They're killing off Galecaller Fae way ahead of Brother Ironhall. It's almost below 20%, where they still have Ironhall at 60%. Now, in order to combat the inefficiency of dealing with one of the bosses first, usually what we'll see with this strategy is them ending up pulling 1 or 2 trash mobs on top of the remaining health of Brother Ironhall, just to make sure that they're cleaving something down. Whenever we talk about efficiency in the MDI and making sure you're being the most efficient possible, you almost never want to be single targeting something down, because cleave is always way more damage.
Most definitely. Better to hit two things instead of one. We've seen a big Shadow Meld on the side of Games Revolted, running past all of those other mobs, taking advantage of that Night Elf ratio. We're seeing Trill pop tricks and he took one hit for his efforts, but he's redirecting all the aggro, redirecting all of those mobs, and once one of the patrols runs through other unactivated patrols, it social aggroes them and brings everybody in all together to join the party. Here we go.
And this is awesome. So one of the biggest problems with doing a triple pack on the bridge is that the two patrols patrol in different sections. And the biggest problem is making sure they all stack up at the exact same time and having Trill go with that stealth, make sure he tricks the pack, everything will slowly creep together. That was just perfect control. And the way they've been playing this dungeon, the AoE CC once again is completely perfect. And once again, with the double and Holy Decay, everything is dead before they have to deal with too many of the mechanics.
Who needs a Soothe Dispel? They just didn't even have to worry about it. When you have double DK, they obliterate it all.
That was fantastic, and I don't think we've seen that kind of strategy. That's the kind of thing that Trill can bring to your team. That's some of the huge brain strategies that we can see from him.
That's right, and they're getting themselves ready to go to Lord Stormsong, so they're taking care of some of those Abyss Defilers. Atari's running up to start that RP, making sure the events get rolling. They might have to go after the other pack. It's really dangerous having to deal with these enraging Dwellers if they're all getting cleaved down equally.
Yeah, and we also saw them.
Here they go for the next one.
In order to combat that, we saw them going for half sides at the same time.
That's right, and very cool to see how they're going to be dealing with the Emissary of the Tides at the same time. Because as we've talked about before, yes, it prevents it from having any of those casts being interrupted, but if you start adjusting the Z-axis, you start adjusting the height level of this Tides Emissary, you put it onto one of the pews, then you're able to start dropping some stuns and interrupts into those Dwellers and make your life a lot easier.
And of course, we do have them now engaging the third boss, Lord Stormsong, and this is kind of a big chunk of a health boss. There's not a whole lot that goes on here. They really just need to make sure they get interrupts, but the biggest section of this fight is making sure you're dealing with those Void Orbs properly. Whenever a player in your group gets mind controlled, you have to make sure that they can soak all of these Void Orbs. Of course, if you run into one of those without that mind control, you get stunned for 8 seconds and you probably get one shot on this difficulty on Tyrannical, so you're going to see them slowly kiting the boss around the room, making sure they're dealing with those orbs perfectly.
Yeah, this boss also kind of reminds me of Captain Lockwood, what we just saw in Boralus. You're not quite able to get lots of high efficiency into it. It's just this boss that stands alone. You're not able to grab any of those tentacles into the pack as well. We saw a little bit of trash being pulled into Lockwood, but because you have the spotter, it pretty much doesn't matter onto that one. You just kind of have to be able to drag this fight out and be able to just follow the mechanics as well as you can. We also have to look at how well they're going to be using any of their Shadow Melds or any of their AMS immunities to make sure they're avoiding getting mind controlled so they don't have to waste any time.
We saw on the side of Method EU, they have now also pulled off the triple bridge pack just as perfectly as Games Revolted did, using that Typhoon into Ursul's to make sure they have an extra form of CC there that, counteracts the Ring of Peace from the Monk. And I mean, honestly, they're not tilting at all. They're playing perfectly for the rest of the dungeon. And when I think about Method EU, we've said it so many times, their biggest competition, in my opinion, is themselves. If they play perfectly, I think that they have the best strats in general. So it's good to see them able to come back in this dungeon and give themselves an opportunity should Games Revolted have some mistakes at the end of the dungeon here.
That's right, and they'll have to be able to capitalize on any of those mistakes if we see them out of Games Revolted. But let's talk about Sydney Land, though. We saw they didn't really have as optimized of a group as they wanted, making sure they were getting the entire team available to them. This time, they counteracted that. They got the right people in the right spot and made sure they got as much practice as they needed to. And we're seeing the real Games Revolted. We're seeing the real 40K that we've been able to enjoy from our regular season.
I mean, Games Revolted, when they were 40K in the second season, we questioned them a lot whether or not they were the caliber of team that could make it to BlizzCon, because they were sitting in that 4th place slot for so long. And honestly, the way they were playing throughout that season, it made us question them a bit. But in the Final Cup,
they almost lost it.
They did almost lose their spot. But in the Final Cup, they showed us by winning the entire cup that they were ready. Now, unfortunately, like we mentioned before, they have Trill instead of Lazzle here. But this team, they don't look like a team that has a sub. They're playing so well.
Yeah, we even were able to talk about that for some of the offline games yesterday. It doesn't look like this is a team that should be in the lower bracket for it, unless it's BlizzCon at this point, because we've been so stacked to the gills with the best teams possible. So, Games Revolted 86% on Trash, and as they approach our final boss in this one, and looking to be able to try to tie up the series if they can.
And of course, one thing that I want to talk about, because it never happened through the cups, but I'm going to bring it up whenever we have the double on Holy DK in the Shrine of the Storm. On Tyrannical, this boss is so much HP, but with enough burst damage, you can just barely have a chance to one-phase this boss. We never saw it in the final season, and like we mentioned Red Captain Lockwood earlier, of course, this is a similar mechanic to that, where the boss goes into an entire new intermission phase. If you're able to one-phase this boss, you save over a minute of time. So I'm interested to see if either of these teams are going to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, it's always been the kind of challenge. They're getting themselves ready. They're grabbing the eels. Everyone's getting themselves together. I can see a couple channel trinkets as we get ready to be able to pull our final boss. Games Revolted wants to be able to seal the deal into this one. Even getting the Ring of Peace up so they can start organizing and rounding up these mobs together as Volzit's about to be pulled.
They're letting the DKs stack up their Festermite before they pull the boss so that they have the strength buff for the entire boss instead of just when they pull it. I think these guys are going to go for it. Now, keep an eye on the boss's percentage.
Oh, it's gone! Fury destroyed it! It's not there anymore!
The lowest we saw this boss get in cup play was like 72%.
It's already there! It's already there! It's gone.
Guys have a shot of, they're going to go for it. I'm so excited for this. They're just going right into the trash here. This is fantastic.
Well, it's great because they start building up some stacks that they're going to be able to funnel into the other phase. So once they drop down into this bit of intermission phase, it resets those mobs that they already pulled upstairs. So the Forgotten and Sunken Denizens just reset. And then once they break out, they're going to be able to engage them again, even with the boss, and to absolutely obliterate them as well, and pump up that single target damage on Volzit.
And this is another strategy that we haven't seen yet. They're opting to just cleave down this trash with the boss instead of deal with it separately. We almost always see teams try to deal with the 3 denizens by their own because their casts are so difficult to deal with. You know, if they get one of them off, they heal to full HP, they do a lot of damage to the group. They one-shot your healer because he has that damage buff on him. And I mean, this is such a huge confidence play. They're just going to cleave them down with the boss.
They know they're able to do this. They know they're confident. They got one last denizen to take down in the netherworld before they're able to come back to reality, grab more eels, bring it into the big pack. Igloo's got to be very careful on this one, because keep in mind, he has 10% of his usual HP. If he gets hit by one of those eels, he's going down.
They're doing it again. They're going to be building up those stacks on the DK, building up those Festermite strain stacks, and they're going to be pulling into the boss. Army of the Deads are coming out.
I love the patience. Bloodlust going as well. They're going to be able to absolutely destroy these Forgotten Denizens. They're making sure they put up a skull on top. Make sure they... Oh, the cast does go off, but Igloo lives. He does use Cocoon Dampen, but he goes down. He goes down. He did get killed. They do have a res available, but he does end up losing his 9 stack damage buff, so it has to get refreshed. The boss has to recast it onto that one. They really got to be able to top off Rentari here.
I'm interested to see how low this boss gets. I think with the healer death, there's going to be no chance of them phasing the boss, but they have to make sure that they deal with that Forgotten Denizen. It's casting that Consume Essence in the back, and if that goes off, Igloo might go down again.
He will go down again if they don't get that kick. Nobody's in range to be able to do it. The cast goes off. Igloo's at 25, and Disco's down under this one. They have another battle res available. They have just one left, but they're going down into that phase, and they cannot afford any more mistakes.
Now, I believe Igloo did dispel himself right before that cast went off because he knew it was going to go off, but Wolf Disco didn't have anything available. The Icebound Fortitude, the AMS, both of them were on cooldown, so he just had to go down. But they're in this intermission phase right now. They have to complete this intermission phase before they can come back up and deal with the rest of the boss.
The other problem is they didn't kill 2 of the denizens in reality onto that one, so they're still going to be missing a little bit of trash. And that field is going to be blocked by that void zone. So if they come back to reality, they have to wait or even just kill the boss outright before they can pull those denizens and finish up their trash. Not as clean as we wanted to see. Method EU, we can't be forgetting about them. They're at 70% as they're going to engage with the boss for the second time.
Their boss is 7% higher. If they're able to one-phase this boss, they could have a chance of still taking this map, so we'll have to keep an eye on how much damage they're doing to the boss,
because this is
definitely possible. They're pulling all of the remaining trash into the boss. They're going to be cleaving it down with the DKs. Zalia did end up rocking his staff there, but we have Igloo down again for Games Revolted, and they don't have a res available.
They just got to kill this boss onto this one. They're trying to be able to get that Forgotten Denizen back in, but 2 casts have gone off because, again, it's in that void puddle. Like I mentioned, they need to be able to get a ranged kick onto it. The DKs have a little bit wider range than the other ones do.
Look at that
manifestations. 5% onto Volzit. We just looked away, and it was at 70 onto this one. They are destroying this boss. Man. Bring it down, but there's still a big death differential on this one.
So Games Revolted still has 25 seconds on the board in that death differential to take care of the rest of the trash. If they're able to kill these 2 trash mobs within that timer, they still take this dungeon, but they have so much HP left to deal with. I don't think it's going to happen.
It's going to be so tough for them, and Method EU is just so well prepared to be able to capitalize on any of the mistakes that Games Revolted had. There's 3 deaths throughout the boss fight. It was just a nightmare, and Method EU, 2 O's Games Revolted. Well, there's
first map. And here we are, BlizzCon 2019. We're getting started in the second lower game of the day. And Jack, it's been a long time, man, being up here with you. It's a pleasure.
Well, the last time that we did cast together, was last year's BlizzCon.
And it was last time I had hair on my head, too. Woo! Both teams right off the bat immediately getting out to the side. No shock to see this big pull coming in here. But, Jack, Tettles mentioned earlier, I'm really worried about the bolstering with these pulls.
Yeah, and bolstering in particular, especially with how different the health pools are for a lot of these different mobs. Well, Somebody's mantle goes up on the side of Team D. Ab has already gone down. Ab, you might recognize, is usually being the healer of the team. They've had to kind of switch things up on their roster, and they are having Zidge go down as well. Lots of deaths coming up onto the board. Team D off to a very rough start.
Yeah, rough start. Bolstering is everywhere at the moment. We're going to probably have a full team wipe here. We already have the cheat death out of Baby Pig right now. Trun will survive. He goes down. Long is not long for this world. He should be going down in just a moment here. And that's 6 deaths on the board right now for Team D. Buff Warrior, much easier time getting in a good snap position here and getting ready for the Colossus snap pull. Love to see it. And finally, the Bloodlust coming out of Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue. This is looking good for them here, Jack.
This is a great position as well. Jumping onto any of these spots where there's no path available to them makes it so the mobs instantly teleport to the target with threat, and it also makes it so that the emissaries throughout the dungeon are not able to snap onto the point as well. Enchanted Emissary gets pulled, runs downstairs and sees it has no place to go, and just teleports out.
Now, we do know, Jack, this past season that the Colossus does not heal to full when you kill one of the trolls near it anymore. Yeah, you're welcome. However, you have to be careful with the bolstering. The bolstering is a huge issue, and they make sure they kill the Colossus first, because still when you kill the trolls nearby, you get that damage buff. Masterful work here from Buff Warrior. This is the team we want to see. Bring in their A-game at BlizzCon, but Tomboys procs that cheat death. Loda goes down as well at the last second on Zombie's mantle. He took a lot of damage. Jack, I've taught you well. But, they just got by that with, they were splitting hairs there, Jack. Don't even say it. Don't even say it.
What would you know about that? Not too much at all. Well, for Nerf Rogue, again, they've had a couple deaths, a little bit of sloppiness onto it, but they're moving on. It's a little bit more we can say for Team D with 12 deaths already racked up onto them. This is rough. But for Nerf Rogue with a massive pull right now.
Yeah, and important to note, this is one of those packs, as we know, that you can actually separate the emissary away from all of these juggernauts and the priestesses. It just comes independent because you see it hanging out in the back there, the enchanted emissary, not concerned here. But Buff Warrior, Nerf Rogue has their work cut out for them right now with all the bolstering and, of course, all these sanguine pools going down from the priestesses right now, doing a great management of the health pool right now. Team D on the small screen still trying to catch up, still having a lot of struggles with that first pull, Jack.
Yeah, the head control has been very strong on the side of Buff Warrior, Nerf Rogue. Great grip into the Strangulate stun on the side of Supreme there, making sure they're getting out of the way of the mob. BK just took care of it entirely. Grip into stun, into Chains of Ice. I don't even have to worry about it at all. The Enchanted Emissary going down nice and easy.
Nice and easy. And Priestess Alunza already pulled here for Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue. 92% on the board for them. Now, Jack, we know, if you do the phases properly, if in your case, but you have to get through about 25% health every time they chunk. So a lot of teams will oftentimes go downstairs. We saw it a lot in the season play, and they'll pull some extra trash on top of this boss and cleave it down together, even despite the bolstering being present.
That's true, and a lot of times it wasn't really about them putting too much damage into the boss, just to do mechanics properly and grab whatever they could to be able to round all of it up. On this side of Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, there's got to be that confidence to them as well, getting some of the worst of the pulls done early, but you are starting to see all those mobs, like you just called it, they're coming right up to play.
They're coming right up, and Ching's health yo-yoing up and down right now. He just can't get out of that 4-stack of Grievous. Heroic leaps away to grab aggro on those mobs. All Loda just taking chunks of damage. Ching just cannot stabilize right now. Rallying Cry defensively pop for the group to make sure that they can survive this onslaught of ads coming in. Priestess Alunza still at 28% health. They only have 3% more effective health to do before the final transition. Ching's shield wall is still active. He has it available if needed, but it looks like they're finally stabilizing here as Team D has now hit 22% trash on the board.
I love those moves out of Loda there, making sure he had photosynthesis, so he had his life bloom onto himself, maximize that photosynthesis talent as he was popping Shrank to be able to stabilize everybody. He even used his Crucible of Flame, often offensive damage Azurite Essence, to make sure that he was able to keep himself alive, because that transfusion damage plus all the ads coming in on top of them was absolutely nasty.
That final transfusion hit there on the team was actually
so heavy.
You still got to worry about the damage intake on bolstering. The boss finished herself off, of course, because of the transfusion, but that was scary there. Gates going down here for Buff Warrior, 57% on the board, 1 death as they get ready, and they bump the Sky Screamer out of the way and immediately are getting ready to run down to Razan, our resident dino boss in the lower pit. So you can see Ching just going up the side right now, grabbing the Sky Screamer. Actually, not the Sky Screamer, he grabs the Emissary and brings it down to Razan, of course. Don't want to be bolstering that boss. Team D has, it looks like they've moved over to Volk Hall, so they're on the completely opposite side of this dungeon right now.
We always love to talk about the different routes that are available here in this dungeon, and the positioning especially for that Tides as he pulled him down. Made sure he moved it to the corner, walked it down the stairs, so if that mob ever ended up walking past any other unactivated mobs, it would just start pulling all of them and have a catastrophic effect on them, because you can't interrupt any of the mobs affected by the Tides Emissary.
That's a lot of Raptors here on the side of Buffware and Nerf, but of course they're trying to benefit some single target from that and feed into that unholy DK, and you can just see the damage coming out of it. Now, of course, some of that is the glorious pad damage on the side, but it does funnel a lot into Razan, who's now just hitting 67% for Buffware. Already have killed Atal'Dazar. We see 58% on the side of Team D, still sitting at 22% trash, and 12 deaths. That's an extra 55 seconds already on the board, Jack.
And it is a ton of extra time that they are going to be struggling to be able to make up. At the rate that they're going, Buff4 Nerf Rogue is in a very comfortable position. Xing's health really isn't. He's been taking some massive hits on those.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that bleed from Razan, the tank debuff, is an immense amount of damage. Here's his armor. You just get absolutely crushed as a tank, even in a warrior. That's just one of the best for any kind of physical onslaught from the boss. There's the application again. You'll probably see his health yo-yo, and he doesn't really have any defensive available to him either. He only has Spell Reflect. It's going to do nothing against that bleed. And we do have Iron Bark available from Loda, but pretty confident in their healing there, and they stabilize the situation.
That's right. They still have Last Stand and Shield Wall coming back in just a moment, so it should be ready for the next round coming up. Making sure they're taking advantage of that line of sight to make sure they're avoiding any of the big Fear Bomb that comes out. And then, right as the Tide Emissary is going down, they're making sure they have another mob to be able to continue cleaving. They even grab both of them and start bringing them downstairs for more cleave damage, more consistency onto that one, and just more efficient. Bolstering, no one even have to worry about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you certainly don't want to bolster this boss. You don't have
got
to
15%.
True. But, you know, we've seen actually a lot of mistakes on this kind of pull in season play. People would miss interrupts on the fear, and the entire team would get feared and either reset the boss or have them wipe. But Buffware and Nerf Rogue is here to play at BlizzCon, and they down Razan right now, looking to finish off the two Skyscreamers and start heading up and making their own way to Volcall. Down the stairs of Volcall is now Team D, moving down to the side, and a lot of yo-yoing in health there again, Jack.
Yeah, that pull is incredibly dangerous on the side of Team D, fortified and bolstering with Grievous coming out with all those affixes working in tandem to each other. It's one of the more deadly packs that they have to go after, and it's very, very kick heavy. Having to deal with these Saurids, the more they're able to get into these good snap spots, the better. But sometimes you are seeing some of these extra jumps causing these mobs to jump away, not be able to receive any of the extra cleave damage, and now those are some very big Raptors.
Those are some big Raptors. Supremes go down, Ching yo-yoing up and down, and they're looking to finish off these very bolstered Raptors, but not before Ching bites the dust, and now they're running around frantically. Swords jumping left and right, looking to wipe the team, and that pull was not the dynamite pull that they were looking for, Jack. A full team wipe coming out of Buffware, and it's funny because this is what Tettles was talking about. Those swords seem so just not very menacing, but they are so capable of wiping because of the bolstering.
Truly they are blessed by the trash Loa Yanni. Because they just trashed on them, so that was...
Moving on here, Tomboys, of course, not having that cheat death available for the next 6 minutes right now. They do finish off the remaining swords that were still present. Now, of course, we do know that they lose the bolstering should they get out of combat, and they did there by finishing off the entire team. True CC in the form of Sap goes up on the side of Buffware and Nerf Rogue as they start heading over to the right side. Now, remember, Jack, of course, since they came from Atal'Dazar's side, they already have the door leading up to Volcall open.
That's right. Either side, either Volcall or Atal'Dazar have gates blocking them off, and both of them have levers to be able to open both doors. So they did a great job to be able to make sure they got that open. And once again, that Emissary of the Tides, they're able to make sure that it does not snap, it's not in position with everything else, and they're able to get some good cleave damage onto it before they bring it in to the next set. So they can even start snapping some of these Skyscreamers now that the Saurids are dead. You don't have to worry about bolstering them up too heavy, and if they're on different elevations, they can get the interrupts.
Right, you are, Jack. 75% here for Buffware and Nerf Rogue right now as they finish off that Emissary of the Tides and start heading back across. It looks like they're going to combine a bunch of the Skyscreamers together right now. Maybe 3 or 4 of them. We've seen both versions during season play, and it looks like we actually have 4 of the 5 of them. That is a lot of interrupts needed, and they're only capable of interrupting 4 of them between the 3 melee and the 1 tank, so they're going to have to keep
the Hibernates
on this. The Hibernates coming out of Loda, spamming and making sure that nothing gets off right now, but they have to kill all 5 of these mobs at around the same time, otherwise bolstering is going to take over and be an absolute nightmare. Nothing but terrifying screeches fills the screen right now, but Buffware and Nerf Rogue holding this down. That poor Skyscreamer is trying so hard, but it just keeps getting hibernated.
Oh no. You'd love to be able to see it. 5 mobs, all requiring interrupts. All you gotta do is spam. That makes me so happy to be able to see. I mean, it's kind of like King's Rush. Start spamming Shackle Undead as a priest. We have them here. And you have a great bunch of fun.
I mean, you know, Healer's got to do something once in a while, Jack. But Nerf Rogue has moved into the dangerous pool that we saw Team D do earlier, where a lot of danger coming up, but Tomboys goes down. He doesn't have that cheat death available because of the sword slip up earlier. Marito getting chunk left and right, and Grievous starts ramping up on all these players right now, making Loda's life particularly hard right now. Tomboy about to fall over here too, and Team D looks like they've stabilized, Jack. I mean, they're kind of chugging along slowly through the dungeon, but no more slip-ups from them recently.
True, but I think that's one of the things you have to look at is how to separate teams into tiers, the level of a team, level of a competitor under this one. When we saw Method EU fall behind, they didn't miss a beat. They were going back into those same pools. They were staying that aggressive and following the game plan, but I don't really see that out of Team D. We're going to have a lot of the different Sky Screamers coming around. We'll see how bolstered some of those end up getting as they take it down, but they have a lot of work ahead of them.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly do, and you got to leave it all on the BlizzCon stage here. You don't have an opportunity later in season play to get points like we see, you know, prior this year. So hopefully they can kind of get themselves together. But Ching going down here on the side of Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, and you know, from an execution standpoint, Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue Jack is doing quite well, but they keep having these small slip-ups with deaths. Of course, they had the one wipe, but here's a death for Tomboys, here's a death for Ching, and with what we saw Method EU do earlier, you can't have that coming up against them. Yeah,
they've already stacked up those deaths to 8 at this point. I mean, we saw previously, I mean, if we took like the death we saw right there, we took the death that we saw with some of those snap pulls very early on the left side as they approached the Lunzas, they might have been able to get away with some wins, but if we're going up against any other competitors, any of the other Western teams, they would just almost instantly lose as a result.
These guys are here to play hard today, that's for sure. Buff Warrior, Nerf Rogue dealing with their first round of full call here, making sure to get all those totems down at the same time as Team D has progressed across the bridges and is heading up to the Alunza area. I mean, they still got to deal with Razan, let's not forget. So they're substantially behind in this dungeon, even if the death difference between the two teams has now been shaved down to 20 seconds. Full call about to enter the second phase here, and I do suspect that they're probably going to save their last Bloodlust for Yasma at the end.
Yeah, at this point, they have one left available. They want to make sure they make the most out of it at that point. So totem's about to fall down for Volcall, and we are able to make sure he activates just at the right time. They got to add a little bit more damage, make sure the totems all die at the same time. Otherwise, they regenerate. And this is a pretty nasty boss when you only have one disease to spell at your disposal, and you have to deal with Grievous.
Right, you are, Jack. Yeah, Grievous is really quite dangerous, and for Lunza as well, which is where Team D's heading right now. But Team D, you got to think about it. Team D's only moving to Lunza. They still have Razan after, and they could have shoved a second Bloodlust. And just as I say that, here comes the Bloodlust with the dangerous pull in front of Priestess. So I guess they had a lending ear to hear from what we were saying here. Full call down to 69% here for Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, and right after this, they have nothing but to cruise straight on to the last boss.
That's right. We got to keep an eye on Team D as they see how they'll be able to execute onto this one. Not really liking how they pulled that Enchanted Emissary. It was kind of splitting their focus a lot. I was worried if they were going to miss an interrupt, miss a CC or stun, that would very well hurt them quite a bit. But we're seeing those honor guards on the side of Team D. They're still alive, and they're starting to get bolstered now as a Priestess fell.
Yeah, this is actually looking quite dangerous for Team D. This pull has lasted way too long, especially with the use of Bloodlust, and it's getting quite unstable. You can see both of the rogues just chunking down to 50% right away as bolstering starts stacking up on everyone. You're going to have a lot of damage coming in.
There's the healer going down.
And the healer goes down right away. You hate to see it, but Zai's eating dirt now. 80% still left on the board.
That was after seeing that Juggernaut at the very beginning of when Team D pulled that setup. Healer just stood right into the Juggernaut's cleave. The second the Juggernaut got too heavily bolstered, it just completely one-shot him. They have to wait for their Windwalker to be able to put out the res, and it's just more time spent, more time burned.
More time burned, and you know, Buff Warrior was kind of running out of a room in there. There's just so much green goo everywhere, looking like a Ghostbusters movie up in there. But they're getting ready, and they move over to the last boss right now, immediately mounting up. They get past the trash, and you can see that they use their Shadow Melt to make sure that they can skip that pull that absolutely no one ever pulls in their right mind in Atal'Dazar, and off they go. Team D still having struggles. They have pulled a Lunza, but they're miles behind. I mean, Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue's got to wipe maybe 2 or 3 times for them to even have a chance to catch up.
Yeah, they're gonna need a lot of assistance to be able to catch up on that one, as Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, even with 8 deaths, we still have this one well in hand. They have to watch out as they have no battle res left available, but this last boss in Yasma should be more than enough for them to be able to take down. It should be easy for them, and they should be able to easily trying to take out in this game 1, and we'll have to start looking and thinking about Underrot as well at this point.
Yeah, and then we're going to have, if I'm not mistaken, Reaping on the Underrot coming
That's right.
up. But important to note, I mean, kind of, fickle affairs at this point, but Loda's did actually get his staff procced early on Volcall, so he's not going to have a nice big nuke for one of the ad waves here on Yasma, or just to chunk the health down right now. But a lot of damage coming in on the team. Loda starts healing up ASAP, wanting to make sure that not everybody snowballs into that 4-stack of Grievous, along with the damage that comes out of Yasma at that 100 energy at the bottom.
They played really risky onto that one. Whenever she maxes out on energy, she will spawn those ads, as you mentioned. But they just dropped Ring of Peace and stood within melee range. They almost had any of those ads hit the boss. If they did, it would have been absolutely catastrophic, since it does put a very lengthy, about 20-second dot onto the group. And you have Grievous stacking up, so you have to be completely overhealing everybody to make sure that you're removing that extra bleed effect. So you got to be careful onto that one, but when executed properly, it is very good to watch.
It's very good to watch, and just look how much damage Loda's able to get out of this situation, too, with the team playing properly. Yeah, a lot. A lot of damage. Oh, Jack, we haven't heard that one. We haven't heard that one at all. Yeah, but Yasma here at 35% right now for the team as they look over to finish the end of this encounter. Team D nowhere to be seen right now. Tettles, for once, was actually correct about this. Team D just not bringing their A game, Tettles, but hey, don't give me that look. But they really need to shape up for the next map, and I mean, we know we'll touch on this later, but I mean, you don't have a second opportunity at BlizzCon. You come up here and you got to leave it all on the stage, and Team D is just not showing it.
Oh, they have to pick up their computers.
Well, that's true. Actually,
they can't leave it there. Oh, that's true. No, they're keyboards. They can't leave it there. 13% left remaining on the side of Yasma for Buff War Nerf Rogue, as the last wave of ads has spawned, killed off quickly and easily as we're getting down into those final percentages. Team D still working on Razan, still 13 deaths onto the board. Buff War Nerf Rogue taking game number 1.
You never want to go full model, take it from me, Aaron, I'll tell you right now. But starting off here in the Underrot.
Just one.
Reaping is back. Both teams aggressive pull right off the bat. We got the Maggot coming in, we got the Matron on top of it all, and there it is, Jack, the big pulls that you wanted to see.
That's right, as we are seeing popping load away. The Crane is going up, 140k DPS for our healer friend. He also even took double bleeds from the Matrons right there and still healed himself through it onto that one. 150k HPS coming out of the Mistweaver. I love Way the Crane.
Laughs and Wave the Crane. Buff Warrior off the bat, finishing off the rest of the pull. Now, of course, we're back in an explosive environment here in teaming. Just have those extra mobs present in the dungeon, but somebody's got to babysit all those explosive orbs coming up. You don't want your team chunking for 0.5% of their HP. Jack, big difference here between the two teams. Outside the fact that Buff Warrior Nerfs is already well ahead in the dungeon.
Yeah.
They didn't use their Bloodlust.
They did not, indeed. And it's kind of surprising to see as well. I mean, that was an incredibly big pull, but they took care of it with ease. And kind of interested to see, I mean, are they going to bother bloodlusting Reaping mobs onto that one, or do they have some bigger plans left for us in Kragma's?
I don't know, but we're about to find out here as Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue about to hit their first Reaping wave. A reminder for those at home, Reaping hits at every 20% trash checkpoints in the dungeon, so 17% right now, Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue. They're about to spawn their first Reaping wave and take it straight into the boss. What you looking at, Jack?
Rise. There they go. Elderly Axe has been pulled. All of our Reaping mobs they've killed earlier are coming back with a vengeance. There's pumping up some supreme damage for our
Demon
DK.
Hunter present here. There's no vengeance at all. But Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue already has 10 seconds rolling into their Bloodlust. The mobs get down and dirty with the rest of the team here. Now, it's important to note, and what I like here, and we saw this often in the Reaping environment a couple seasons ago, you pull the boss, wait for the Reaping to come in. It allows the Warrior to get the spell reflects that are ever so damaging back into Elderly Axe's face, allowing them to get a nice bump on damage there. 10 seconds left on their Bloodlust as Team D is only now starting their Harrowing Despair pull.
They are, and it's taking more time to be able to put these pulls together. I mean, they ended up paralyzing the mask mob just to be able to pull it anyway, dropping some stuns to be able to make sure they're getting all of their kicks out at the same exact time for any of these different mobs, making sure they get it all together. But it's just going slower. It's just going slower, and they're not really optimized in a lot of their routing at the moment.
No, certainly not, but still 0 deaths on the board for them, so a lot of a cleaner, much cleaner start that we saw in the previous map from them, but it might be too little too late here. Elderly Axe already down to single digits of percent. Final Blood Bolt coming in, reflected right back in the face from Ching BB, and they're gonna head downstairs and onto Kragma's room. Now, Jack, This is really what we were talking about, that we want to see the big damage and the big numbers come in Kragma's room. We saw insane pulls come out of double DKs towards the end of the season this past MDI. Do you think we're going to see the same thing here?
I think we have to be able to see the same thing. If Buffalo or Nerf Rogue wants to continue proving that they're going to be a top flight team, they've been crushing the Eastern region, but now when we're coming into the West, they got to be able to prepare specifically for them. So we'll be looking at quite a big pull. He goes all the way halfway across the room, grabs everything. I'm curious to see if he's going to grab some more of those lashers in the back. It looks like he does. He's got like 5 lashers in this pull. There's going to be a massive revival going to be going off after Way of the Crane. Seeing everybody getting grouped up together. 120k HPS for Loda right now. He is absolutely crushing this, and so is Supreme.
Supreme is absolutely destroying this pull right now. They combine everything. They masterfully handle all of the explosives, and just like that, half of Kragma's room is gone. But they're not stopping there. They grab the Reaping and pull the remainder of the trash, most of the remainder of the trash in the room, as they try to get near that 60% mark.
Yeah, now it's the Rogues' turn to start putting their damage on display as Tomboy starts pumping up those damage meters, 250k DPS, and it looks like they're going to just continue. Supreme dropping pretty low. He does catch that frontal off of the Fetid Maggot onto that one. They got to be very careful.
They do. Marito practice cheat death as well. It doesn't have Death Pact on the side of Supreme either, so a lot of yo-yoing back and forth. They had to dump so many resources and so much love into that massive pull earlier that they got to catch their breath and refuel here. Team D certainly slugging along right now. Elderly Axe to 22%, and they'll be moving on to this room. We'll see exactly what they can do, but Jack, they don't have the presence of an Unholy DK, which pretty much single-handedly carried that pull with 900k DPS, so I don't think they're going to be able to pull that off.
It already signals that they're not prepared. They're not going to be in the position to be able to pull off those larger pulls, and they're going to have to lean a lot more on their kicks and a lot on their shutdowns to be able to take care of the lashers, to be able to take care of the frontals from any of the maggots that we've seen already. Dealing a lot of damage to Supreme. Didn't bring him down quite yet, but it's something that is always something in the back of their mind. They got to make sure they're keeping that in mind, because it just takes 1 DPS to fall for some of these pulls to just...
Right you are, Jack. 53% here for Buffalo and Nerf Rogue. Jack, remind me if I, correct me if I'm reminding myself incorrectly here, but...
That's really complicated.
Yeah, and it happens often. It happens often. But Buffalo and Nerf Rogue and all the teams during the Reaping season would often proc the 60% and aggressively drag it onto Kragma so that we can benefit extra damage from the Unholy DK.
So I like this idea, but why don't we proc Reaping, grab Skeletons, and grab Kragma as well?
That is not a bad idea, and I certainly don't have a bone to pick with those Skeletons, Jack. 60% right now on the boss. Kragma pulled to the side. I'm a really big fan of Kragma's position here near the entrance, combining it quickly with the Skeletons. Huge amounts of damage coming up, and we're about to see that Unholy DK rise up pretty soon. And there he goes, finally passes onto the top spot DPS, and just like that, everything's pretty much dead, Jack.
That's right. We're seeing Loda trying to refill on mana as quickly as he could right before the pull started, because Way of the Crane, 25% of your mana is the cost, and it's the price for that. And if you don't have Mana Tea, you're going to be in quite a bit of a hurt for those mana. And interesting to see if we're going to start grabbing any of the other Skeletons, because we still got 70% left on the boss. If you're able to have enough mobility from your team to be able to run, grab Skeletons, bring it back, might be a little bit too much for them, but the benefits are certainly very high.
They are indeed, and we're about to see our first tantrum here right now going down from Kragma on the side of Buff, where a Nerf Rogue team starts to frantically, but in a very well-situated manner, run around and stomp all of those Fetid Maggots on the ground. You certainly don't want those ticks exploding when they're killed, should they spawn. Ton of damage on the tank, and the Healer Jack is the last thing that they need. Extra shadow damage explosions on the group when, I mean, his mana is already below half, and the boss is not at 0.5%. That's
right. I mean, he just popped Way of the Crane once again, so it does burn quite a bit of mana, but it'll probably regen a little bit over the duration. I really love what we were seeing out of Loda. He makes sure he was grabbing that last pile in the back. Then he drops his Transcend, so he'll be ready to take that position next time. And the fact that he's running with Tiger's Lust makes it very beneficial for his own mobility, making sure he'll be able to get a lot of those extra stomps so the DPS don't have to.
Is that a Dampen Harm I see active on Loda, if I'm not mistaken? Of course, reducing up to 50% damage, depending on how much damage you take. Finally starts run around helping stomp with his roll, making sure that none of these ticks spawn as mentioned earlier. Kragma now down to 41%. It doesn't look like they're going to be too aggressive. It doesn't look like they want to run off and grab another one of the skeleton packs, so they're probably just going to finish this boss or try to comfortably finish it off and then move on, as Team D, as predicted, doing a much slower routing through Kragma's room right now. They've only just now procced their second Reaping, and they're just limited by their comp. They can't do that kind of pull without a DK.
Yeah, they're still just kind of struggling along. I mean, I don't want to say struggling along, but they're just taking their time too much, and this is what we talk about about when we say, hey, these guys have 2 weeks worth of practice. We need to see the most optimized, we need to see the most aggressive pulls possible in order to make it work. So going to be a big challenge for them at this point. Unless they have something else, they're just putting Buff War, Nerf Rogue in the driver's seat.
They are certainly in the driver's seat, and they're not taking their foot off the gas right now as Kragma hits 15%. After this, expect that we're going to see some pretty aggressive pulls, and again, just to remind, at least what we used to see in the previous seasons, they're likely going to combine in some way their 4th Reaping Wave with the third boss of the dungeon, so that should be, yeah, I mean, I'm just, you know, when I look at you, I get tongue-tied, Jack. You're just so handsome. 5% left here on Kragma, about to go down right now is Team D looking like they're trying to proc their 3rd Reaping and drag it into Kragma. Triple Lasher pull coming in for them.
That's right, and we are seeing Kragma fall for Buff War, Nerf Rogue, so that's 66%, and we were talking about how they're going to deal with Spore Caller, being able to grab all those mobs. I mean, they might just do another round of what we were looking at with Kragma, you know, make sure they're grabbing all the mobs in there, killing them off really quickly, and then you're having Reaping coming in so you can kind of get a double dose. But unfortunately, it looks like they're just going to be taking on that Danger Noodle as well. It's 66%, so they should be able to immediately proc Reaping. Might just have everybody sprint over, but I'm pretty worried about Loda's mana right now. He just popped Way of the Crane, but it's going to be quite a long boss fight to deal with Spore Caller, and when we have Reaping coming right after this.
Yeah, so it was nice to see, you know, that kind of coordination, stealthing past that menacing macaroni and then grabbing everything together and then bringing it right on top of it and cleaving it down, making sure that it's well interrupted. Buff War and Nerf Rogue here, just shy of 80%, perfectly calculated, and they're going to use the final 2 callers in the distance there, the Defilers that you can see off screen that have the skull and the X mark above their head. Those are going to be used to fuel that 4th Reaping Wave into the boss.
I really like the blind that they have on the Deathbringer there. They require a lot of kicks, these Bloodsworn Defilers, so it's very helpful to make sure that you drop the blind on them. Maybe you have the Rogue Refresh after that point to make sure that you're not having to deal with any of the additional ads being spawned, have to deal with the Wicked Frenzy, which absolutely trucks tanks. It's a lot less stress onto the group, and I love how they're spreading out the kind of their pulls and requirements onto that one. Because once Reaping spawns from those Defilers, it makes it a lot easier to kill off the Death Frenzy.
Yeah, and honestly, it's not really the most dangerous mob solo, as you said. So they're handling, they're kind of front-loading a lot of the difficulty with the pull here, handling these 2 Defilers, excellent coordination and interrupts. It requires 2 melee interrupts per caster, 1 for the Shadow Bolt Volley, and of course 1 for that Withering Curse, making sure that they stomp out all of these mushrooms, despite Xancha being a fun guy in this.
Big revival coming in.
You gotta love the revival. The one use you get out of it happens right here.
Hey, they got another really big use when they grabbed 5 Lashers in and they had to be dispelling everybody all at once, plus Reaping coming into the picture. It really does work out quite well with Reaping, especially when you're having more trash coming in. But they have to really watch a lot of the dispels onto Ching because it's going to be trucking him, and Lotac's only going to have 1 available. So if they stack up too high, they refresh too early, it could really hit him hard.
You know what I miss most about Reaping?
Everything?
Well, yes, but also the raging Rigatoni just gliding across the screen, coming in menacingly along the ground. Reaping goes down finally for Buff War and Nerf Rogue. Their penultimate Reaping Wave has been handled quite masterfully on top of Spore Caller Xancha as they make sure to position the shockwaves and, of course, the upheavals, eliminating as many of these mushrooms as possible. As you mentioned, Jack, we don't have Revival anymore. We have 1 Dispel if really needed, but we've got to get rid of those mushrooms.
That's right, so they do a good job to make sure they're grabbing a couple extra here and there, putting a lot of the pressure onto Lota so that he's going to be able to pop his Fortifying Brew, get some extra damage reduction on top of that. And it really is like the latter half of the instance that you really start seeing Diffuse Magic becoming a lot better, but having Dampen Harm is so strong for Kragma.
Yeah, Dampen Harm is quite a lovely tool to have. They kind of split the room right now, and I mean, there's not mushroom left between the front and the back here, so they're going to have to use that shockwave from the tank in the front side, but they do have emergency tools available. If they miss some mushrooms outside of just the Dispel, you can pre-AMS Anti-Magic Shell from the DK. We have, of course, the pre-cloaks that can come in from the Rogue, so they are quite stacked from a comp perspective and are able to handle this boss with any emergencies.
That's right. Team D, on the other hand, is at 20% left onto Kragma as we're about to get another tantrum for them. Still, no deaths just yet. They're at 65% onto the trash, but it's just slow and steady isn't winning this race.
No, it's not. And finally, we see it. A tantrum the size that Tettles throws when he finds out that Starfall does not get buffed. You hate to see it, but there he goes. Kragma now down to 15%. Spore Caller Xancha 12% here, and Buff War and Nerf Rogue will still need that remaining 17%. And then we're going to see, of course, that final Reaping Wave drag down down into that kind of teleport to the final boss room, cleaving it all together there. They do have their Bloodlust available. Likely that's what they're saving it for.
That's right, and of course they are not Night Elves onto this one. They're taking advantage of those Arcane Torrents for the next set of skeletons that they will have. To be very interested to start looking at that, as they do have to be able to grab those skeletons. I'm kind of curious as to what they're going to start going after onto this one, because ideally you're at 17% left on trash. You'd love to be able to do this in just one big go, but some of the noodles that are going to be in your way, some of the other obstructions that are available to you, you have teaming as well, so there's another one that's spawning right on top of them once they get into this pull. It's just more of like a frustration, because you really want to be able to grab it into those last two defilers at the end, or the corruptors at the end.
They actually grab a corrupt on top. This is actually a really dangerous pull here. They got to interrupt the noodle. They have to interrupt the defiler ×2. They have a death speaker in there on top of it. They have a corruptor completely displacing them non-stop right now. This is a very scary pull.
It's a very scary pull, but they know that they have enough mobs to be able to very quickly kill them from the Unholy DK side, and they're going to be able to heal it from Lotus side with Way of the Crane. The more mobs they have, it's okay if there's a lot of damage going on to that, and they just got revival back if there were too many of those noodle casts going through. So it's in many cases, I think it's a big relief for them to be able to have that level of a pull ready.
Certainly, and they're now perfectly at that 96%.
Jump.
All they need are the final two corruptors, excuse me, here, right in front of the door, which will of course give access to the final boss, the Unbound Abomination, and they will combine that 5th and final Reaping Wave with it. Of course, Reaping, some dungeons you're able to kind of, skip that last Reaping Wave by doing the boss first. Not the case here in Underrot.
I liked how Supreme ended up saving his Army of the Dead. He could have been using it onto that previous pull with all the skeletons, but he rightfully saved it for that last boss, because he will be able to get a ton of damage out with it going into it. We have Reaping available, Bloodlust available, everyone's cooldowns are just about to come back. And while I like that they have this pause to be able to get themselves ready for the final boss, I also kind of don't like this pull at all, because it's just so slow. You're only pulling 4% of your trash, and you're taking 2 minutes to do it.
Yeah, no, it takes a while, but typically it's what everyone does on live. I don't know.
That's
Maybe,
the problem, is
yeah,
it's like it's so difficult to shut down, because you're not Night Elves, because you're not able to Shadow Meld off the effect of any of the noodles that are coming around. So it's just a tough way to make it more efficient. And I think that this dungeon's also pretty ripe for some better innovation.
Right you are, Mr. Jack. Finally, at the last boss, we've arrived here on the side of Buffware and Nerf Rogue. Here comes all of the Reaping on top of the boss. Bloodlust indeed pulled, as we alluded to earlier. Supreme is about to go nuts on damage in just a moment. All CDs are being popped, and that Reaping Wave is just helping fuel more single target into the Unbound Abomination.
Oh, all the mobs are gone. 600k going up for Supreme, as he's full of runic power and absolutely pumping that energy bar from the Unbound Abomination onto that one. Of course, this boss does not take regular damage. It instead fills up his energy bar. He'll start spawning with some small bloods, and then the Titan Keeper Hezro will be assisting you in killing them off.
What a nice young man that man is. Now, Team D on the side, we were commenting that they're moving too slow through the dungeon. On top of it now, they just had a full team wipe. I mean, they were just not prepared for this BlizzCon, unfortunately, but Buffware and Nerf Rogue, really surprising here. And Tettles just joined us back on the desk, and I mean, they're looking fantastic, and I do think they have what it takes to handle some of the best EU teams as well. Unbound Abomination now halfway through the fight, as the second round of Energy Bar has filled halfway.
Yeah, going on to this one, it just goes to show how well Buffware Nerf Rogue has prepared in many cases. You're looking at what are you doing with your time? Do you have to be able to deal with any sort of alternates? Do you have to look at how jet lag is going to start impairing your team in a case like this? And we saw a little bit of that when we were looking at the Sydney LAN as well. Going into with these teams coming in from all around the world, the flights that the Europeans especially had to deal with, the differences in time zones. It goes to show that Buffware Nerf Rogue, they're able to put on some very clean performances, and I think this has got to be a real confidence booster as they're about to be winning this game and then going off against more very difficult opponents to get out of the lower bracket.
And I had a chance to even catch up with Method EU yesterday, and a lot of these teams actually find it an advantage that they have to make the run through this lower bracket, because they get more time to get comfortable up there on the stage. Rich mentioned it earlier. It's really important for these players to feel comfortable on this big stage. But comfortable here indeed, as Buffware and Nerf Rogue is about to hit the last filled energy bar, spawning the final 2 bloods here, and they will be claiming this map 2-0, barring any unforeseen consequences. But Zyra's not up here, so he's not gonna he's not gonna curse this team this time. Here are the final 2 bloods. They immediately head off. Hezro will be helping with one of them as the team immediately grabs the other one. They're gonna finish it off in just a moment here, and they are going to keep their BlizzCon 2019 hopes and dreams alive as they progress further in the lower bracket.
That's right, the last mob goes down. Buffware Nerf Rogue, as Tettles predicted, taking that 2-0 victory. time for talking, Tettles. Time for talking with Tettles.
Yeah, so something that's actually difference between these two compositions is that Zamak is actually on the Mistweaver Monk, where JB is on that tried and true Restoration Druid. I think overall, the Mistweaver Monk seems like it should be a little bit better of a pick for damage inside of this Reaping environment, but you can't really ever go wrong with playing Restoration Druid.
That's true. That's just how it goes. And we're seeing Zamak putting up some big damage and healing with that Way of the Crane, getting himself started. We've seen so many times where popping defensives, getting in as deep into the mobs as they can, because you only have those 15 seconds before the damage buff wears off, before the healing transfers start wearing off as well. So I love how well he's going to be able to get himself in that position, start succeeding. And we're already seeing first boss coming up on the side of Method EU.
For Method NA, they actually popped with their Bloodlust in order to be able to go into Sky Captain Crag with this Reaping Wave, whereas Abrakeydabra delayed it a little bit, got the Reaping to spawn, then used their Bloodlust in order to be able to do that. Dr. J actually ended up going down. He procced his Cheat Death and ended up actually dying. So that's two defensives that are gone from Abrakeydabra. He actually didn't use his Riposte. I wonder what ended up happening there.
And the Doctor was certainly out onto that one. And I was just about to say, even though Method EU pulled the boss first, that would have been their opportunity on the side of Abrakeydabra to pull ahead and boss percentage. But with Dr. J down, that just definitely starts putting a little bit of a damper in them.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think it's just going to be momentum swinging throughout the dungeon. With this 20 to 30 second difference on whenever you actually end up getting your Bloodlust, I don't really assume that it's actually going to make a difference. This dungeon should probably last somewhere in the range of like 13 to 15 minutes just because of how these teams can pull around Reaping. Utilizing the double Unholy Death Knight will be very important for both sides.
It will be, and another interesting point into the healer differences on that one. You're able to see the rest of Druid pump out way more damage whenever you're having to have him sit out at range. He should often be baiting any of the goops that are popping out of the bird on the side, but you're also seeing Zamak. He has to sit away in the corner, make sure he's staying out of range of the shots coming out from Crag, and make sure he's just getting a little bit of chain lightning damage, but you're seeing the differences right now. 8 to 18 KDPS. It's not even close on this one. Range DPS definitely helps.
Yeah, range DPS absolutely helps. It may have actually been better for Method NA to where they actually used their Bloodlust timing because it overlapped with the Trash Pack and with the boss at the very beginning, whereas Abrakeydabra is like sole just reaping on the boss with their Bloodlust. It may have actually cost them just a little bit of time. Overall, you see Method NA actually killing the first boss, making their way towards that middle part of the instance, whereas Abracadabra's first boss will be dying in just a few more seconds.
Yeah, not too terrible difference in terms of times on this one, and we still have a lot of room to work with. And keep in mind, we are going to be having to have the drinks going on right now. So the Bilge Rats, whenever you drink with them, you are going to be able to activate the Council of Captains setup. So this makes it a lot easier for them to quickly activate the boss. We're seeing a couple of the guys getting the drink debuff right now, and then they'll be able to set themselves up for a very large pull, because we have to keep in mind, once you activate that, a lot of the trash starts going friendly to you. So you want to be able to round up as much of it as you can. It's much easier if you're just having one last person activating the drinks, activating the bosses once you've already pulled them.
Yeah, so you actually see both sides here drinking really early to be able to make some of those mobs go friendly. I think it may just have something to do with some of the mobs that end up going friendly you would otherwise not be able to like chain some of the pulls. So you actually get a lot of leeway in terms of that. Method NA actually ends up pulling this straight into the boss here with all of this trash. You actually see the double DK here. They drop their D&D, they pop their Unholy Frenzy, and that trash pack gets evaporated.
It really does onto that one, and you're able to even see just a lot of healing coming out of Lighty as he was just taking a bunch of damage and had to heal himself so much that the healing meters thought he was a blood DK.
Yep, and you actually see on the side of Abrakeydabra, Dr. J is running away. He ended up grabbing and starting that RP inside of the council area just to make sure that that pig is available whenever they are coming back. They end up pulling some trash into the boss as well. So we're actually seeing very mirrored approaches coming in out of both of these teams.
Yeah, there was a lot of requirements. There's a lot of it that had to happen all at the same time. Yoda had to run into that ring of booty, start the role play right there, get back to the group, while Lighty and Shakib with the tanks, the group, were grabbing all those mobs in together, making sure they establish threat, drinking the last drink to activate the bosses, and then be able to pull everything in. So we have Captain Raul and Captain Jolly taken down and looking pretty equal in terms of the damage.
Okay, so something that's actually different here is Abrakeydabra actually proc their 40% Reaping Wave here, where on the side of Method NA, they're at 38% trash count, so they actually haven't procced that. So I wonder what the difference towards the back end with that second and potentially third Reaping Wave will actually be. Abrakeydabra I don't know if they actually had their cooldowns available, so how worth is it that they procced this second Reaping Wave into the boss? It could have just been inadvertently a little bit dangerous. You could require a little bit more healing, so the healer DPS could have just been a little bit lower on the bosses, whereas on the side of Method and A, they actually do down the second boss a little bit quicker than the Abra.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising not to see them activate the extra Reaping Wave onto that one. I'm wondering if maybe there was another mob that was missed that did end up going friendly once they did have their final drink. Didn't cause them to activate Reaping at all. But they got another big pull coming in on this one, and they'll be pairing it up with Ludwig von Tortollen pretty soon when that roleplay gets finished. But they have to be able to wrap up the pig first, wait a little while on top of that. Here he comes.
Yeah, so you actually do see him spawn. He actually does a sizable amount of tank damage because he does dual wield. You can actually block or dodge or whatever.
And he can also miss.
Yeah, he can also miss as well, all of the damage, but this trash pack is getting evaporated. You actually see the 2 death and decays going down right on top of Ludwig, and he is like 50% health now. So that's just the power of the Unholy Decay.
Power of the Unholy Decay, but I'd like to see them pull something a little bit more in on this one as well, since you only have Risen Souls and you have Ludwig going on right now. Yes, it is fortified. We have more Reaping coming in as well. I think there was just a lot more opportunity as we're seeing the full extent of the Reaping organizing right now. And
Yeah.
I think that Nerf's getting into a pretty decent position if he wants to start pulling some of the mobs around any of the target dummies as well.
Yeah, so I think that's actually pretty interesting. They proc their 40% Reaping on Ludwig, but they're at 56% trash count. Now they're going to pull 2 more mobs and proc their 60% Reaping here, probably also into Ludwig. Of course, Ludwig, whenever
He's almost dead.
Whenever he's actually rezzed as a Reaping mob, he actually will last a long time. But for some compositions, this can actually be to their benefit because he is just like an extra vehicle to get more priority damage.
Yeah, that's very true, especially with having the Outlaw Rogue and keeping your wits about you as a right trait. So you are seeing Nerf grabbing a bunch of mobs in together. That way they will be able to proc that extra Reaping Wave as Trothak, the Shark Slayer, the Shark Puncher, gets himself ready. We get to see the nice entrance. Let's see some fireworks. And they gotta be careful with those fireworks. Oh, they're getting a little bit too close.
Well, looks like the spectators have been burned. Abrakeydabra also has down Ludwig. They're looking like they're doing a pretty similar pull. Both teams are going to proc their Reaping on Trothak, the Shark Puncher here, but it looks like Abrakeydabra is just a little bit behind. Not something that 2% trash count can make up at least.
They did end up killing Ludwig. They're about to proc their third Reaping Wave, as well. They have Trothak coming down in just a minute. It seems like they're a couple steps behind onto this one, and you have that plus the extra 5 seconds to say maybe it's 20, 30 seconds total in terms of difference in these teams. Still a lot of room for Abrakeydabra in order to catch up on this one.
Yeah, just with teaming, it's actually pretty interesting that both of these sides actually elected to hit the brew so early in order to be able to get some of their count.
They haven't even won yet. Why are they hitting the brew so early?
No, they hit the brew on the second boss to be able to... Stop.
All right.
But yeah, I think Abra may be able to turn this around. They actually have an insane amount of trash that they may be able to just like walk straight into the Harlan Suites area using the cannonball barrages in order to deal with all of that. But
I don't think that we're going to see any more trash out of Abrakeydabra. Once they kill this boss, when they kill all the surrounding mobs in the periphery, they're going to just go straight to Harlan Suites' room and just grab everything on his island.
Did JB just get meleeed by the lost soul of Ludwig?
Yar, matey. You don't want to be messing with Ludwig.
What? He just died like randomly. I think he got meleeed though.
It might have also been some of the sharks running around because it's important to note that any of the slows that are going on to them can start just aggroing them insanely and making it so that only any of the chum lying around in those areas can be stopping them. So might have been a bit of a combination on that one since he was standing pretty near to the boss's charge and he's taking care of every single shark that pops up.
Yeah. So this is actually a really close matchup. I think, like you said, Abrakeydabra actually is catching ground a little bit. They may actually only end up being about 20 seconds-ish behind. You see Method in A here is starting to get some of that extra trash in order to be able to bridge the gap, whereas Abrakeydabra just dealing with the lost soul of Ludwig and just single targeting down the boss here.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how much trash is left on Harlan Suites' final island, but we're fully expecting both of those teams to be able to run in there, make sure they're grabbing everything, rounding it all up. They have 2 more Reaping Waves potentially to deal with on this one. Hopefully they'll be only having 1 since they'll be trying to kill Harlan Suite just as the last one spawns, but they're going to have quite a ways to go. There's a lot of trash, and there's going to be a lot of danger in that island as well.
Yeah, so you actually saw a mob sapped on the side of Method in A, and then, so then they shadow melted off the 2 mobs that they were actually pulling on the bridge. Now they're using their Shroud to be able to make make it towards Harlan Sweet, of course getting access to the Cannonball Barrage. Abrakeydabra doing something very similar.
We're going big? Are we grabbing everything?
Man, I don't think they're going to grab everything. I think realistically they're
grabbing everything. Oh. They're grabbing everything out of this one. You got the double unholy DKs. You gotta grab everything. We're at BlizzCon, baby. Harlan Sweet been pulled, as well as all of his surrounding guards. And a big mess of damage going to be coming out for those unholy DKs as they're getting some very big stacks and absolutely popping off.
Yeah, so utilizing the Unholy DK is pretty important. Whenever Harlan Sweet is above 70% health, he will actually only spawn one Cannonball Barrage at a time, whereas once he is actually below that 60% threshold, he will spawn it on 4 members, excluding the tank there, and that makes it really easy for you to be able to kill trash with. However, whenever you have double Unholy DK, apparently you can pull that middle path.
You don't even care.
Yeah, you don't even care about getting all 4 of them. You can just go all the way in.
That's right. I mean, we've seen Abrakeydabra as well. They did end up pulling the boss. They're at 78% left on the trash percentage. So going to be looking for Method NA once the next round of cannon fire is going to go out. They grab that next set. Again, all of that cannon damage from Harlan Sweet will be blanketing damage onto those ads. You're just seeing all of the pools of reaping spawn as they end up dying. And they still got a little bit more trash, but we still do have, I believe, 2 or 3 packs left remaining on this island. And we got a whole bunch of reaping mobs on the way.
It's been interesting to see what's occurred. I feel like Abrakeydabra actually just got off to a little bit slower start at the very beginning of this matchup, and since then they've just been right on Method NA's tails. Unfortunately, it looks like they may end up losing it. Harlan Sweet, once he actually does dip below 30% health, he will cast his cast again, and then he will take 50% increased damage. Method NA only needs 1 more percent, so barring a catastrophic wipe, they're probably going to bring this home. Abrakeydabra has their Bloodlust rolling. They're doing the last little bit of trash that they need to be able to complete the instance as well currently.
That's right, Abrakeydabra not too terribly far behind, but now that Method NA has gotten sub 30%, they're pumping in that extra damage, and it does look like they are going to be primed for taking game number 1 from Abrakeydabra. They're getting that last bit of trash. I thought they already had it wrapped up with them. That should be enough for them to wrap it up. And
Think about what's on the line. Whoever wins this goes to the grand final.
Oh, I'd love to be able to see some good old Waycrest Manor. And even think about it, Tettles, we've got the only 5-boss dungeon, so it's tyrannical, of course. It's very tight, narrow corners. So we have Sanguine and we have Quaking at our disposal. And keep in mind, it's not 8.3 Quaking. It's not, nice, safe, friendly Quaking. It's a lot of damage. Yeah, it's a lot.
I was talking to Yoda a bit at breakfast this morning. He was like, He's like, who picked the affixes for Waycrest? We were just joking a little bit about it.
Smiley face.
It was me. So you actually saw a little bit difference in pulls at the very beginning. You actually saw Method NA did that first pull with all those soul essences, whereas Abrakeydabra using their shroud, running all the way through, melting off some of that trash, and making their way towards Heartsbane Triad. Whereas on the side of Method NA, they kill the trash, they make their way just a little bit behind. Again, we're seeing the exact same compositions coming through. Zamak is on that Mistweaver Monk. JB still on that tried and true Restoration Druid. What do you think about the difference between these two healers inside of Waycrest?
Well, I think in looking at it in particular, the potential for these large-scale pulls is so incredibly high, and it does bode well, I think, much more so for Way of the Crane than it does for taking advantage of the rest of Druid. Well, it does have a strong kit at its disposal. The more that you're going to be able to funnel heavy damage going into some of these bosses, it's going to be very helpful for it. And I think in many cases, you will see a number of moments where it's not quite about just the raw damage healer to healer, because you have to keep in mind there is going to be that 5% Mystic Touch that the Mistweaver does bring. And while you're not having that much physical damage coming out of the Unholy DKs compared to the Outlaw Rogue, compared to the Prot Warrior, it still adds up quite a bit.
Yeah, Abrakeydabra was playing a very dangerous game there. They actually pulled the Acolyte and some of those Toads into Heartsbane Triad. They made sure that they actually CC'd all the Toads. They killed down the Acolyte. They used their Ring of Peace to be able to keep the Toads at bay whenever they did die, to make sure that they did not heal up Heartsbane Triad, because it would have been very dangerous. Whereas Method NA electing to not pull any trash currently with Heartsbane Triad. I think a lot of times whenever we have Sanguine on this boss, teams will pull the Acolytes and the Toads in at the very end, but Abrakeydabra, with all of their cooldowns and Bloodlust, pull it in at the very beginning. Method NA still hasn't even used their Bloodlust, though.
That's true, and it's interesting whenever we start looking at the differences in routes and the potential that's available for Method NA to use their Bloodlust where they want to be able to go, because the next step for them is going to be the courtyard when the gates open very wide as the last percentages for Sister Malady are ticking down. Abrakeydabra, they got 2% trash on the board right now, but they are going to be in a great position to make some big noise. That Void Emissary is getting right in their face, and they want to be able to grab a bunch of different mobs. You're seeing Dr. J running away, grabbing some more mobs to him, and you're going to be able to see the Shadow Meld coming out as well. And that's what I think we've been talking about a little bit, is how they're skipping around some of these Void Emissaries in this dungeon.
Yeah, that was actually very well done by Abrakeydabra, and now they're going really big inside of this courtyard area. This is the difference between healer damage right here. With this Way of the Crane damage coming in from Zamak, you actually had the double DK as well, dropping all of the mobs on top of that. That was a really, really good Ring of Peace there.
That's right, and that's one of the things about control as well, since we are in that Sanguine and Quaking phase. Now, it's not that it cannot be done on Method NA's side, but it's something that will be a lot more stressful for the group if they're making any wrong moves. You got to keep in mind, you know, JB does have Typhoon at his disposal, so we'll have a similar sort of knockback effect, but it's also one of those things that's like a stopping area. It's a bit of extra kiting room for the tank, you know, being able to have more control over exactly where those mobs start dropping their Sanguine and making the tank's life easier.
Yeah, Method NA's pathing here is kind of strange compared to what we've actually seen in this dungeon during the regular season. They're actually pulling like a bunch of these witches, all of the captains, and that Void Emissary that we actually do see getting skipped by a lot of teams.
I love this routing right now out of Abrakeydabra. They pulled it out a little bit in the regular season right now, but they did have Dr. James, the doctor himself, running around, avoiding that Matron, and then pulling the boss with it. But it does look like they're pulling the Matron just a little bit later. Not sure if it's going to be a mistake on their part, because it's very easy for this Matron to be healed up through any of the Sanguine, and Divine is dropping so incredibly low. This is going to be testing Zmok's mana so heavily.
Man,
look at the kites. Look at the kiting. He's just running around trying to dodge Sanguine puddles. He's going to have to reset the boss right now, otherwise he is going to die.
Okay, so Matron Brindle actually has to get pulled for Soul Goliath to activate, so one of the DPS actually has to pull it, reset her.
Oh, look at the stacks. She has 5 stacks of the damage buff right now. Divine's got some mighty cooldowns up at the moment, but that's not going to be able to last forever, as I believe she's only at 60% HP, maybe even 70%. So they are really losing out on a lot of options. They opt instead just to drop the Shadow Meld. It will reset Matron Brindle, but right now, their entire route is in shambles, okay? They have to wait for their Shadow Meld to come back, or even a Vanish to come back for the Rogue, because they need to be able to get the reset. So thankfully, Dr. J has it at their disposal, and they need to pull Soulbound Goliath once again, get back to the group, make sure the Vanish or Shadow Meld works properly this time, because that bonus damage from the Matron is not going away.
That was a major blunder. That actually probably costs them like 45 seconds to maybe a minute. Matron Brindle's not supposed to get pulled. I don't actually know what happened. Maybe he got healed by some incidental healing from Zamak right before he actually pressed his Vanish. Maybe he pressed his Vanish a little bit late and maybe walked Matron into the group, but what started off as a really solid play has now propelled Method NA into the lead here.
That's right, and they are still going to be all right a little bit with some of their routing at their disposal. A little too soon to say on that end, because they are going to be able to go back and continue to reset that Matron. But like you mentioned, it just still puts them further behind in a position where they really don't want to be, because they have some tremendous snap potential when they go into Rawl's side.
Yeah, and Method NA here, whenever they actually pulled Soulbound Goliath, they elected to use their Bloodlust there, so they ended up saving it about 5.5 minutes into the instance, which is definitely going to be pretty interesting. Typically, this dungeon has been about somewhere in the range of like 17 to 19 minutes, kind of depending on what affixes are present and that kind of thing. In a Sanguine scenario, they're basically saying with that 5.5-ish minute Bloodlust is that the dungeon's going to be a little bit longer than 15, but it's definitely going to be shorter than 20.
Yeah, at that point, it's just kind of comes down to where Abrakeydabra is going to be able to make up a lot of that missing percent, how quickly they're going to be able to handle it, because Method NA, that 37% trash right now, and you almost wish that this was going to be a Reaping dungeon. There'd be so much.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I actually really like the dungeons that they picked for Reaping, for what it's worth.
That's true. I mean, there's
Freehold
only so
and
much.
Underrot.
Yeah, there's only so much high trash density that we can get in on it. And we'd love to start seeing some heavy tyrannical, and also how much people change their routes and how much people have to adjust when the affixes are really rough for them. They're really challenging. I mean, we were looking earlier, a little bit of adjustments for Atal'Dazar with bolstering, for example, but we weren't seeing too much danger, too much upset coming when you had Teaming and Volcanic going into that last Freehold.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what Method NA's pathing is going to be like for the back half of this instance, because they front-loaded this instance so much with all of the trash that they were pulling, unlike any other team we've seen before. They did like a Void... They've done multiple Void emissaries, and like they did that captain pull in the corner that Abrakeydabra skipped, so I think their pathing is going to be pretty interesting, unlike anything we've seen before, whereas Abrakeydabra taking a little bit more traditional approach that we saw in the regular season.
Yeah, and that's one of the things with time at your disposal and how many times you're trying to reiterate and grow a dungeon's pathing, how much you want to be able to change about it. It's always very important to kind of get a good idea of what's going on, because we're seeing some massive run coming up on the side of Method NA. They might be jumping on to that snap spot right onto the banister right there, so everybody's going to be able to get in and get some massive damage onto these guys. Quaking coming out, so they got to really watch themselves as there's spits on everybody in the group, and lots of room for JV to be pumping out some heavy healing.
I love this play.
Sanguine.
Basically, not only the Sanguine, but the Emissary of the Tides, whenever Nerf jump into that snap spot, Tides won't snap with you, so they'll just like stand there for a little bit waiting. Nerf comes out of the snap spot, then the Tides comes in with the group. So after all of those low health mobs got obliterated by the Unholy DK, Nerf gets out of the snap spot, snaps all of the mobs away from the Sanguine, and now they deal with the Tides with just these Gorgers and these Peasants.
That's right. There's a little bit of issue with some of the Gorgers running over the Sanguine puddles, but they do get it down without too much hassle, and now they just have to deal with some of the little small mobs right now as they get themselves ready for the next pack. I was hoping they'd be able to pull something a little bit more with this or continue chaining, because just killing these off is such an annoyance.
Yeah, I mean, 6 maggots, they probably could chain that. I mean, it can be pretty dangerous, but...
I mean, he's good on mana at that point. He was still at like 40-something% mana at his disposal, and you have to be able to find a really good time to proc your staff. I think it's a little bit early at this point, but you're not really worrying about staying at full topped-off mana 24/7 here.
So something that I know that Method NA has been playing around heavily is really like making sure that they have the Unholy DK cooldowns at their disposal. A lot of times people want to just like hard chain like the whole entire time without these massive damage cooldowns coming through. And I know Method NA is saying that they really have put practice in and making sure that everybody has their cooldowns up.
I love this Sanguine kiting right now. Usually we talk about Unholy DKs getting smashed whenever they take too much aggro off of the tank. Right here, Method NA uses it to their own advantage. They actually let their Unholy DKs generate aggro onto these mobs, get the threat that they need in order to kite them out. That way Nerf is still able to tank raw. I love the positioning on this one. It's so clean, and it's a tough thing to do with Sanguine.
Yeah, you actually did see a shine go down on the side of Abrakeydabra as they have just a couple more mistakes. I think
this is a messy pull on the side of Abrakeydabra. Like, you're seeing Method NA stabilizing as they're bringing down Raw, but Abrakeedabra's got a lot of work to do onto this one, as that Way of the Crane is just about to fall off for them, and they just need to be able to pump some healing to keep everybody topped.
Yeah, Method NA has definitely been taking a little bit more technical approach to how to deal with this dungeon, whereas Abrakeydabra has just been... While their pulls have been bigger, they've been sloppy. They had an issue with Matron Brindle getting the 5 stack of that Soul Fetish. They're just having a few issues here as they're finally making it into Rawl's room. So they're at the same point in the dungeon, like, geographically. However, Method NA has 76% trash, whereas Abrakeydabra only has 53%.
Yeah, that's right, and pulling more of those emissaries right now. They did have to deal with that Void emissary in the kitchen, which takes a lot of extra time. I think right now, Method NA is just going through this dungeon with a scalpel. They're having such precision on where the Sanguine is dropping, where are these mobs coming from, and that's something that you expect to be practiced so heavily when we got into Motherload, and something that was just like, well, I hope that we never have to deal with Sanguine here. Now that the Affix is here at BlizzCon, they've done such a great job optimizing their route accordingly.
Lighty actually tries to grip that Peasant out of melee, but unfortunately he just doesn't die too quick, walks back in, drops the Sanguine.
Touches? Yeah, it doesn't touch.
Yeah, it doesn't actually hit Raw, but it reduces the amount of space around the boss's melee, which can actually be really, really annoying, as you see Shakib and Lighty just kind of walking around the boss trying to see where they can stand without taking too much damage, as Raw will be going down in just a couple more seconds.
That's true. And we're also seeing at the start of this pull for Raw, it takes quite a long time, but having that Ursul's Vortex really set them up so well in big way because it was allowing them to make sure the DKs were able to kite only in a very specific fashion. If they were moving, for example, towards the tank, if they're going to the other side of the boss, they just snap right back and then be susceptible to the Unholy DK's AoE damage, where they'd hopefully be able to draw threat and then kite them out. So well done.
So they're actually getting a couple of these maggots here at the very end. I think this may actually be all the counters they need.
Meld. Yeah, so they're going to grab that, then they're just going to run and Shadow Meld.
Yep, they're going to make it all the way down to the Lord and Lady Waycrest room, pop their meld. This is why they front-loaded all of their trash like that. So they actually don't have to pull that Huntsman's Lodge area that we actually see a lot of teams normally elect to pull. Instead, they actually just get to go down to Lord and Lady Waycrest's room through that kitchen area pretty quickly here.
I love this routing that they've been doing. They've been so crazy efficient. They're taking their time as well. I love what they did right here. They grabbed the first 3-4 mobs, they got the kicks that they needed, then they grabbed everything else. They're not rushing it, and they're not getting into trouble as a result. Both Unholy DKs are stacked full of runic power, ready to be able to pump some damage into Lord Waycrest as we get started with our 4th boss fight.
It's insane that they actually were able to pull that off without too much Sanguine healing on most of these mobs. That Soul Charmer with the candles cast and with like all the bolts and everything that it does cast can actually be pretty annoying to be able to get out of Sanguine, get out of her candles or something like that. Abrakeydabra pulling a really sizable amount of trash into Rawl now once he's actually dropping pretty low here. You actually see there is a few Tides emissaries on top of the tank. That could actually be very dangerous for Divine.
That's right, it's a lot of damage, but it does look like they're about to teleport out. 10% left for Rawl, as the group does look to be pretty stable and not having too many issues. They got a couple little mobs left available to them, but they'll cleave it out without too much issue. I think a lot of it was on that Soulbound Goliath, and that starts really putting a lot of pressure on your team when you say, we already know that we're down 1 game, facing elimination. Now we just messed up one of our most precise pulls that had so much riding on it. Now we're in trouble, and I think that definitely got to them there.
Yeah, I mean, this has just been the Method NA show for this match. The first series in Freehold was really, really close, and I feel like if Abra were actually able to pull off some of the strategies that they were trying to do, they would have actually been in a good spot.
They're not facing elimination. Oh my goodness. We've been playing so many elimination rounds right now. They would be going down and facing up against later in the series, or they'd be going down to the lower semis as well. So they do still have some life into them, and then that's always a good thing to feel, but they'd also be going up against Method EU a little bit later.
Yeah, and you actually see that Bloodlust timing for Method NA. Now we understand why they actually Bloodlusted on Soulbound Goliath, because it is coming up in 45 seconds. They're probably going to pull all of those...
Everything into Gorak Tool?
Yeah, all of those little guys that do the Shadow Claw into Gorak Tool. JB is going to stand on that spot to where the mobs will not jump away. Those mobs need to be instantly killed, but because it can actually be fairly dangerous for a tank, especially one that doesn't have super sick magic defensives like a Protection Warrior. But then beyond that, just making sure that you blow it up with double Unholy DK. This has been quite the path for Method NA.
It has been very impressive onto that one, and he'll have Last Stand back in time. He's holding on to Shield Wall at the moment, so they should be in a prime position. And looking at how this team has used snap spots and how they have organized the mobs has been so very important, because the Sanguine pools are a nightmare on this boss. So it looks like they've had to spend such a large amount of time practicing to get it ready. Very interested to see how much mana JB is going to get, because he still hasn't procced his staff just yet, and making sure that he's going to get a large proc out of that to make everybody's life easier, and just to be able to start killing off some more of the jailers that are going to spawn, the slavers that are going to spawn from Gorak Tool, making sure he uses the proc for that. That way they don't have to worry about wasting any single target damage and can just focus the boss. Gorak Tool getting pulled right now with Bloodlust going up as Method NA really wants to seal this game.
Yep, and you actually do see JB standing on that little, plant or whatever you actually want to call it, just so that those Gloom Horrors do not jump at him, because it creates a no path available zone. That was actually insane. So while Gorak Tool was casting his ability, they actually, Nerf walked all of the Gloom Horrors off of the boss. They instantly killed him with both of the Unholy DKs, and now they're just DPSing down Gorak Tool.
That control, man, it's that control when they're grabbing such amazing control from these Unholy DKs, being able to get all the grips that they want. They have to watch if they might have a Sanguine Puddle. Oh, it was just one of the slavers going down, getting any of the fires to be able to kill them off very quickly. When they're able to control the burst damage that's at their disposal, it just has such great results. And look at this, 0 deaths up onto the board. You were saying there's going to be between, what, 16 and 20 minutes, 16, 18 minutes, something like that? They're going to be looking to close it out with maybe 17 and a half.
This pathing has kind of changed, like how you have to think about how Waycrest Manor is done. I don't think they've had like any Sanguine healing.
Dr. J's just been evicted. I think he's been evicted from his home onto this one because Method NA is just pulling up shop as the Gorak tool drops down to 40% HP, and we are just seeing the dominance that they are able to pull as they're looking to secure their spot towards the grand finals.
So is it safe to say this is Method in Waycrest Manor, Jack?
It really doesn't have the same ring to it.
I think it does.
Waycrest Manor. Okay, we'll figure it out later onto that one. While, you know, of course, they're on their way and they have plenty of time to practice and get themselves ready as well. Because 25% left onto this Method NA, looking to be in a prime position as Abrakeydabra is just struggling to get past Lord and Lady Waycrest right now. A couple deaths on the board, but just the nerves, the time it took in their routing, the time that they might have wasted from having any sanguine heals going off. All of these things just continue to snowball as Method NA takes their second victory in the series and they move on to the grand finals.